Okay, you're all set.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the third Expanded Budget Committee meeting for the 2021 county budget. Thank you all for joining us. Looks like we have a pretty full house. Jason has a few words he wants to share. Mr. Sunshine.
Yeah, thanks, Martha.
Yeah, I know. Well, thank you, Jason.
Yep.
So why don't you go ahead?
So today I had a call with TC3, Bill Talbot, and it appears that the state is going to be delaying their first quarter payment, which is in September, to community colleges. That's about a $2 million payment that usually comes in September, but may not come until early November. And it may be 80% rather than the full 100%. That's unknown. At the same time, the state wants basically the college to pay TAP payments to students without certainty of reimbursement through the state. TAP is a form of aid that is an important piece of aid, but they about 3 weeks into the semester declared that they were going to be cutting back on TAP. And they want the college, which does not have the means to push those payments out without certainty of reimbursement, to do so is also adding and compounding onto another issue, and that is the state has decided not to adopt essentially the community college's budgets in a normal course, probably waiting to make a further determination around CUNY and SUNY's tuition rates. And obviously, if tuition rate isn't approved, the increase of the tuition rate isn't approved, that's probably closer to 600,000+ of shortfall in revenue. All in all, with the amount of uncertainty, the big issue being this delay in the September payment, all in all, it creates anywhere between a $3 to a $4.5 million cash flow challenge for them. So I put your thing on mute, Deborah. I called Bill and spoke to Rob, the county administrator from Cortland, and briefly Leslin, Martha, and Mike Lane. And we have a somewhat of an emergency meeting Tuesday to kind of go over all the details of this. Martha, myself, Mike Lane from Tompkins, and then Rob, the county administrator from Cortland, and their budget chairperson, which I think is George. I don't remember his last name. George Wallace, is that Wagner? That's it, Wagner. So to kind of go over what this means in the short term and the long term of it. After our last conversation, I know Rick and I had talked, and Kathy was starting to put together the resolution that we have done for the past several years in the fall, which advances them the upcoming years, usually first 2 quarter payments. If the cash situation is as bad as it sounds, and there is that amount of uncertainty, and the state is going to delay that September payment, the legislature may have to consider, both legislatures may have to consider advancing all of next year's payment this fall to them in order for them to stay afloat from a cash perspective. So in talking this, just what I know briefly now, talking this over with Martha earlier this afternoon, you may have to have a special budget, capital, and personnel committee meeting before the 6th to kind of go over more of the details that we'll find out on Tuesday, followed by a resolution at the 6th that may have you consider advancing their next year's payment this year due to the withholdings in state aid that the state is not paying them on a time. So that's all I know. I don't have all the details to it. I hope to get there on Tuesday, and then I'll share more with that with the legislature, but I think it's important that you know that now as we go into this meeting next week.
As I said, Mr. Sunshine.
Yeah, that's a tough one because the state didn't honor last year's budget with the community colleges. They withheld 20%, I think, of the last quarter payment to them, and now they haven't even started the next fiscal year. Their fiscal year starts September 1. They haven't even started that year off on the right foot, so to speak. So I'll get more details as to what that means, cash flow wise, what it means, uncertainty wise. But I think I think it was important for the legislature to at least be aware that the meeting's going to take place on Tuesday, and we'll bring something back to a BCP meeting before the next ledge meeting.
Thank you, Jason. I see Henry's hand, and if there are any other, and then Mike Lane. Thanks, Mike. I see it. Henry?
Yes, Jason, didn't they, in July, weren't they expecting a payment which they only received 80% of?
Yes, that's the payment. That's what I meant by the state didn't honor last year's budget. That's the payment that I'm referring to. Is they got it late, a week or two late, and it was only 80%.
So didn't they anticipate that this next upcoming payment would only be 80%?
It's very possible. I would say it's highly likely if
Because
they get it at all.
because the state said they were cutting things by 20%, correct? Or they
Well, they're not cutting them. They're
withholding?
temporarily withholding them.
Not paying it.
Yeah. Essentially, when this was in June, I remember talking to the budget director Mojica, and he said the state's experiencing liquidity issues, which that was several months ago, and that the 20% holdback or withholding was at that point in time in anticipation of federal relief, which of course has not happened. And I would imagine the state's liquidity issues have not improved, and they continue to make withholdings and payments. Point in hand is they have not forwarded September's aid payment, which is usually the first payment of their fiscal year, of the community college's fiscal year.
Okay.
Mike Lane?
I would just follow that up, Jason, and say that this tuition assistance plan program TAP, what's going on there is a real sleeper. We've got to watch it because you really can't go back to the students and say, by the way, you can't have it now that we've already given it to them. And the state's really putting the college in the middle on this, and it could be an expense. And so many students rely on these TAP payments. It's very important to them.
Yeah, that announcement came 3 weeks into the semester. So, any student aid or loans that would have already been processed and so on and so forth in anticipation of TAP, which could be a few $1,000s a semester, depending on what it is. So that was an unprecedented move by the state. So again, I don't know all the details behind it other than what I've shared with you, but we'll find out more on Tuesday, and we'll send an update out to the ledge. But I thought you all should know that before you talk about budget.
Right. Just one last question for now. If whatever we do, does Cortland have to do the same? I mean, if we advance to
So,
advance?
I mean, this is an issue. I think this is an interesting, no, it's not an interesting issue, but it's an issue where, there isn't, the contribution is, my understanding of it at least, the contribution is the kind of the matching component or the underwriter's agreement. The issue advancing money is not anything that I think was foreseen, when these things were established. So the fact that we may be able to advance some next year's funding is probably, is fine. I think the bigger question is obviously advancing 2021's payment, at the end of 2020 is a structural issue of, if the state withholds that much aid from them, that's a structural budget problem.
All right. Thank you very much, Jason. So we can all sleep on that one for now.
I just wanted to pave the way for Kit for Kit's budget presentation.
I'm sure she appreciates it. Very
I
great.
do. Thank you, Jason.
You're welcome, Kit. I just hand it right off to you.
Right. So welcome, Kit. And just before you go into your presentation, we're delighted to have you and Dina Bodner as well. Good to see you both. One issue, and this is Human Services Night, our Human Services departments, and the public may not understand. I'm sure everybody directly on the call knows that many of the positions that we'll be discussing involve reimbursement or partial reimbursement by the state. So sometimes if you think you're going to save money by cutting a position, you end up losing more than you save. So if the public thinks, oh my goodness, they're just, spending money, in a lot of these positions, it actually costs us, it sounds counterintuitive, but a lot of these positions, it would cost us more to actually cut the position. So I'll just put that out there as a frame for the evening. So welcome, Kit, and I assume you want to share your screen.
I do. So thank you, Martha. And what you say is true. We oftentimes, oh, actually, let's see. I'm going to share my screen.
And Tom Hurden is here too. Hi, Tom. Good to see you.
Martha, thanks. Good to see you guys.
Sorry, just one moment. I'm trying to get my bearings a bit here.
Oh, I'm sorry, people. You should look at, I meant to do the page number in your book, section 4, page 177. And the OTRs actually start on page 184. There's a mere 23 of them, 21 of them. 23 OTRs.
Okay. All right, we should be good now. Let's see here. This is a little different. We use, at the Department of Social Services, we use Skype for Business. So all of these programs kind of operate a little bit differently. So I apologize. It takes me a minute to kind of get oriented here. Can you all see that?
Yes. Can you just show the one slide? We see 2 slides on with half a screen.
Oh, I apologize. Okay. That's not the way it's showing on my screen. So let's see if I can fix
It just
that.
makes things smaller.
Right. Let's see. Is that better?
There we go. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Great.
Okay. So thank you, Martha. I am present the proposed 2021 budget for the Tompkins County Department of Social Services. And I think you already gave the section and page number, Martha, for where we're at in the budget book. So in putting together this year's budget, there were many challenges and considerations to take into account. One of the greater challenges is what we know that we don't know yet. And that in and of itself is a challenge. In years past, our known unknown slide is typically located towards the end of our presentation, but this year we've located it toward the beginning to ensure that we can review it as the quantity of our over target requests that are listed towards the end of the presentation may result in a likelihood of us not having time to discuss all of them. And while our known unknowns are not reflected in our budget requests for next year, they're an important part to be aware of as they really have the potential to impact our fiscal reality for next year. Currently, DSS has seen increases in SNAP, safety net, and HEAP cases. And what we don't know yet is how much public assistant caseloads will also increase once the COVID-19 stimulus funds are not available. We know right now that people are really relying on the enhanced unemployment benefits. But as these supports go away, we really anticipate a rise in families in need coming to us. With regards to state aid, with the temporary withhold of 20% that is currently being imposed on state aid, we're wondering at this point, will that become permanent as we go down the road? When it comes to Medicaid, one of the known unknowns, the unknowns is, will New York State maintain its current Medicaid financing structure that's been in place now for a decade or more? And will it change in a way that disadvantages us as a county? We've all spent a good bit of time last year worrying about that. Will Community Options Preventive Services or COPS funding be continued? And if not, what will replace it? The reason for the uncertainty is because the governor's budget for this year proposed to eliminate COPS funding and replace it with something else that wasn't outlined. That turned out not to be included in the state budget that was passed, but it could come up again next year and it could impact this funding. And finally, there are still many unknowns about the coming impacts of Family First legislative changes that impact federal Title IV-E foster care funding that are scheduled to go into effect on October 1st of 2021. So those are all things that we know will impact the payment structure the Family First stuff we know will impact the payment structure for youths in congregate care settings, but we just don't know the specifics yet. And all of these things are things that we just don't know yet exactly how they're going to impact. Another consideration in putting together this year's budget were the major influences on net local cost for the DSS budget. The next slide shows some of those influences, and we've broken these down into good news and bad news. Unfortunately, there's probably more bad news than there is good news. What did they call you, Jason? A ray of sunshine? The good news is that the Department of Health has calculated an increase. I meant to say I'm also one, unfortunately. The good news is that the Department of Health has calculated an increase in federal share and consequently a lower local share for our Medicaid costs. There's over a $500,000 Medicaid weekly shares savings due to the recalibration of the Affordable Care Act federal share. So the bad news is that the state is really decreasing their participation in costs that we have at the local level. We're seeing reduced mandated foster care block grant and non-mandated the community option preventive services or COPS allocations. What we know so far is that our foster care block grant has been reduced by about $144,000 compared to last year. And our most recent allocation for COPS funding was about $70,000 less than the year before. The extremely low income housing crisis continues. We continue to see that, and it's been exacerbated by the impacts of COVID-19. And although we don't fully know the impact, we probably won't until this winter, we believe that our homeless population is currently rising. We have higher numbers right now than we did last year at this time. And we anticipate that our costs per person this winter will likely be higher due to the elimination of the congregate sheltering option. If you remember last year, we had real successes with using churches to shelter people in congregate settings. And due to the virus this year, we won't be able to utilize those options. Also with the state and federal eviction moratoriums eventually coming to an end, we anticipate greater reliance on the DSS emergency housing and temporary assistance programs by families in need. The fringe rate increase of almost 2% has been a major influence on net local cost in the DSS budget for this year, resulting in about $104,000 additional net local cost. And lastly, the continued shift of our public assistant caseload from family assistance to safety net is impacting our local share costs. The combination of this shift as well as the emergency housing crisis is resulting in about $1 million in local cost. And as I look at this slide, there's one thing that we are missing here. We must have forgotten to keep that, it must have forgotten to include it in one of the iterations of our presentation. The program called Child Care in our budget, which consists of several sub-programs, accounts for about $600,000 of increased net local cost in our budget. And that should be situated here as well.
Before you leave the slide.
Sure.
So that Medicaid item at the top, is that what we've been calling reconciliation? Where under the ACA, counties said there should have been more funding paid. I'm sorry, less of a cost, more reimbursement to localities, and the state wasn't agreeing with that.
I don't think so. I may be wrong, but I believe that all of the changes that are happening that are kind of outlined here just have to do with that federal recalculation with regards to the ACA. I don't think that that's the piece that you're talking about, Martha, but I can get more information on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. So So on this next slide, we take a look at our recommended budget figures. The county administrator has recommended funding all of our over target requests for 2021 and that we submitted, and we're very grateful for that. When you look at this slide, you might be asking, why does this show that our revenue has decreased more than our expenditures have decreased? Some decrease in revenue is because the state is participating less than they have before, and therefore we see increased local costs, as we discussed earlier with the foster care block grant. Another area that we see this impact is the shift from family assistance to an increase in safety net cases, where we see our local share associated with those cases go from 0 when it's family assistance to 71% when it transitions to safety net. So in slide number 4, let's look at what's happening with staffing at DSS. Overall, the 2021 recommended budget for DSS shows a reduction of about 2 full-time equivalents. This chart shows us the changes, and if we look at the top left, we see a 0 net in full-time equivalents for Medicaid, but it shows an addition of a senior social welfare examiner in that division. In late 2018, including in around June of 2019, the New York State Department of Health took over large portions of local Medicaid caseloads from local districts. We were one of them. And DSS used attrition as well as relocation of workers to areas within the department that were either of stable or increasing work to accommodate the changes in a reduction in Medicaid. However, in the course of that change, the state returned some of the cases to the local district that were anticipated to be removed. And as a result, we found that the administrative staff that had been reduced in that division really had been reduced by too much. And we really required a senior social welfare examiner to add to handle the Medicaid managed care programming. So that's what that's reflecting. Similarly, if you look at the top right corner in children's services, again, we see a net 0 in full-time equivalents, but an addition of a senior caseworker. And this occurred as we were seeing greater complexity and intensity of our cases in our preventive services care caseloads. This largely is due to increased mental health needs and domestic violence issues that we are seeing arising with those cases. And as a result, a senior caseworker was added to this work unit to act as a child protective monitor. We really have to stay on top of kind of assessing safety and the need for higher intervention that may come up as a result of those issues on those cases. Below this, you will see our various administrative support changes. These basically net 0, and they're the resulting combination of various retirements and other changes that are typical of annual transitions. And finally, the changes outlined in the bottom left corner show changes in our accounting division, and these changes account for the year-to-year decrease in the overall FTEs for the department. As you know from our budget presentation last year, we've experienced significant changes over the last few years in this division. 2 years ago in the accounting division, there were 2 employees with 30+ years of experience that retired. And within the last past year, an 18-year employee also retired. We are also anticipating the retirement this fall of a 50-year employee who has worked her entire career at DSS in the accounting department, in the accounting division. So the changes in positions here reflect all of these transitions and the resulting hires and adjustments to bring stability into that division. Like every department this year, DSS had to examine our budget to look at where we could make required reductions, and consequently our overall target selection process, rather. This is challenging because nearly all of what DSS does is mandated, and the non-mandatory activities are in most cases 100% grant funded, cost savers, or represent local initiatives. So this slide is a look at what our process of determining what positions and programs would be listed as over target requests were for 2021. Most of the Department of Social Services expenditures are mandatory and either represent paying for benefits for those in need or the administration of those mandatory benefits. So in looking to select over target requests, we identified first those positions that provide administrative support to the staff that are providing mandated services directly to the clients. While it would really present significant workflow challenges to accomplish all the tasks without these administrative supports, they are not mandatory, but support mandatory work, so they were fully examined. We identified expenses that we could likely postpone for a year, such as replacement vehicles and computer equipment. And then next, our non-mandatory supportive human services contracts were identified. These are contracts that, while they may not be mandated, they reduce the necessary intervention in mandatory programs. Even with these proposed over target requests, we were short in our required reduction goal. So we identified preventive services contracts, and whenever we can assist families early in their need for support, often the level of support that's needed is reduced, and higher, we prevent higher, often more costly required interventions by intervening early. Lastly, we looked at positions that support local initiatives like the Alternative to Incarcerations program. And while these things we agree with philosophically and we feel like they're important to good service delivery in the community, they most often support mandated programs, but again, are not required. So the next 3 slides here represent all of our OTRs in our proposed budget, and they show the local cost components associated with each of them. The description of the programs and more comprehensive information is about each of them is in the budget book in section 4, page 184. The process for determining the priorities of these OTRs was mixed, and the goals that we went through really shifted as we were kind of going through the process. It shifted multiple times. So when it comes to looking at the priorities of these OTRs, significant consideration should not be given to that because I'm not sure it really represents fully the full process. And the list of OTRs is really extensive. There isn't time for me to go through all of them now, but I'm going to just show them to you so that you can see them. As I mentioned before, we're really grateful to the county administrator for recommending all of them. So I'd like to open it for any questions. Thank you in advance for your time and consideration.
Thank you very, very much, Kit. I know this is a huge project for your one department. You're like a whole county government yourselves. And this is quite an accomplishment here to get all this in a few slides and actually to bring the whole budget in all together. I see Shauna's got her hand up.
Hi there, Kit. Thanks for presenting tonight. I had a few questions. The first one is, I know that last year we paid to have a security study done and was wondering if there were any changes that were going to be made to the lobby or the building to make things safer. And if so, if there was going to be an OTR for that.
So that's a really good question, Shauna. We are still making our way. It's taken a while for us to get the full deliverables on that study. So part of what happened was that assessment was done, and then almost immediately we found ourselves in a very changed world because of COVID-19. So what we have been doing is working with the contractor to kind of reassess and kind of reevaluate where are we at, what are the changes that have occurred. It's also meaning that we now have the final report. I believe we got that in early July. So we now have the full report. We are working our way through that and honestly have not been able to, given all of the challenges right now, we have not been able to really go through more quickly than this and kind of fully assess what might be the additional costs. So I'm hoping actually next month to present that, to present information about that report to Health and Human Services, and then bring that to the full legislature. So, so that's kind of where we're at, and I don't have an over target request specifically for that reason.
Okay.
But we are in process with that.
Okay, great. And then my second question was, I noticed on OTR 41, it's asking for some employees to go from 35 to 40 hours. I just wanted to make sure and ask if those employees would like to go from 35 to 40 hours.
Yes, so all 3 of those employees that are listed in that OTR have been working for 40 hours.
Okay.
In fact, a number of them have been working 40 hours. I think 2 of them have been working 40 hours for a number of years. One of them may have been like within a year increased to 40 hours. And we did that in each of those cases really due to the work need, the workflow, and the workload. So all of them are familiar with that. So that would not be an increase for them. It is really that what we did was put in an OTR to potentially reduce them down to 35 because we were concerned that it was a way basically to reduce expenses without potentially putting anybody out of work completely.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Sure.
So the fact that let me try to say to you, this is funding to keep them at 40?
Correct. Yes. It is funding to support their work at 40 hours. So I think realistically, what we know is that we will see a significant challenge with the workload in those positions of having to roll that over to another employee, or in one case, the one is a senior caseworker in our family treatment court division. Some of that will be quite challenging to figure out how we're going to cover that work. So yes.
Okay. Deborah Dawson.
Yes, thank you. I have several questions. I'm glad you guys brought up the OTR 41 because the way it reads, we're reducing positions from 40 to 35 hours, and I'm trying to understand how if you reduce time, it costs you more.
Gotcha. So I will go back and look at
That's the reinstatement, Deborah. So as part of the submitted budget, as part of the 12% reduction, that was a proposal that KID had made in terms of reducing them from 40 to 35 hours. The OTR was requesting that they be reinstated to 40 hours, and that's what was recommended. You'll see that. You'll see that in Frank's budget as well, under public health and a few other budgets where, the only way to meet that 12% reduction was to reduce hours in different ways, and this was an OTR to reinstate it to 40. So, in other words, if you were not to approve the OTR, they would be reduced to 35 hours.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
That helps.
It's a backwards OTR, really.
Okay, that's what I thought, but thank you. All right, so back to some of these other ones. I noticed that there are a couple of them: restoring the RN position supporting ATI programs, homeless outreach, prevention, friendship center, Samaritan Center contract with Catholic Charities that are specifically not mandated. And then there's also the multi-systemic therapy contract, which doesn't indicate whether it's mandated or not. And I was wondering, are these cost savers? Do these get us funds from somewhere else in excess of the funds we expend?
So they are cost savers. In most cases, no. The answer is we don't get funds as a result of having those programs. Although there are some that have components that, for instance, the COPS funded ones that we get state funding for. What I will say is that with almost all of these programs, they are programs that basically intervene with families or support families that allow families not to rely more heavily on DSS programming and interventions. So, so what we see is that when programs like these are in place, and I can be more specific about each of them, but when programs like these are in place, what happens is people get, they get supports earlier on. They are maintained without larger interventions by having either CPS be involved. For instance, with many of our programs, like the Liberty Resources program, it is a program that works with families intensively, so that we don't have to remove children, put them in foster care, which is a much more costly alternative. The same thing when we look at things like the Friendship Center. The Friendship Center is a program that oftentimes is there for folks that are homeless or that are struggling with intermittent homelessness. It provides meals, it provides a place for people to get a shower, do their laundry, and it oftentimes results in people not having to have higher intervention levels, either through DSS, through policing, through a number of community supports. So we see that benefit. It is difficult with some of these programs to show exactly what those numbers look like. It's hard to be able to show that if somebody went to the Samaritan Center who was having difficulty with paying rent, didn't qualify maybe for supports through DSS around that, the Samaritan Center might pay a month's worth of rent, and as a result, that person doesn't come to us with 6 months arrears and now qualifies for full support services through DSS. It's hard to show that, but it is in fact the way that a lot of those support programs work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so they're preventive early interventions.
In most cases, they are considered that, yes. They are, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
If we can take the screen off, I think people have the information in their books, so we can see more folks. We have Amanda and Rick, but I'm not sure which one of you had your hand up first. So I'll go to Amanda.
Great, thank you. My question might be for Jason, but whoever wants to answer it. I'm wondering about OTR 58, which is the replacement of the fleet vehicles, and if those are going to be EV vehicles or what those will be.
I don't know, to be, I would imagine so, but I don't know that we got into that discussion to that detail. I know the intent was that they replace some, a good portion of your fleet is EV as it is it not, Kip?
Sorry, I was trying to get out of that screen. Did I get out of it actually?
No.
No.
Okay, I'm having trouble with that, sorry. Can you ask me the question again?
Are the fleet, the vehicles that are to be replaced, are you replacing EV vehicles, electric vehicles?
Tom, can you take that one? I'm not as familiar with our vehicle replacement process.
Yes, I can take it. All of social services fleet, with the exception of a single van, is comprised of either hybrid vehicles or EV vehicles. I believe that we have, out of the 15 vehicles, I think we have either 6 or 7 EV, and the rest are hybrid. The request in this budget is to replace 5 of the oldest vehicles, which are all hybrids, with hybrids. We have a mix of utilization for our fleet, local and long distance, and we have found that we can't rely entirely on solely electric vehicles for all of the transport needs that we have.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that.
Welcome.
All right, Rich John.
Hi, just going back to the OTR 41, are there other employees? Did you reduce a whole bunch of employees to 35 hours and you're asking to bring these 3, or were these 3 focused on for reducing to 35?
It was just those 3. So really what we did was go through that process that I outlined of kind of identifying a number of ways to cut within our budget to try to look at meeting the reduction. And then when we couldn't achieve that fully, we were looking for ways to continue to reduce without eliminating positions entirely. So it was just those 3 positions.
Okay, thank you.
Anna Kellis.
Thanks. And I did end up from a doctor's appointment, ended up missing the beginning. And I apologize, Kit. I'm looking forward to watching the beginning on video. I'm curious specifically about housing needs. If you have seen an increased need for temporary housing assistance, more people are qualifying. Can you give us a sense of that? And does that require extra work?
Sure. So what we are largely seeing right now, Anna, is an increase in our homeless population. So that whenever we see that increase, we see an increase, obviously, in folks that need assistance, temporary housing assistance. And what we know beyond that is that we have a number of folks that are calling us on a regular basis right now and basically talking about preparing for when the eviction moratoriums go away. So we have not really seen, besides that homeless services population that has increased some, we really have not seen a huge increase in the number of people that are coming to us for assistance with housing. And if you look at our numbers right now, we're seeing the largest rises in caseloads in our SNAP and our HEAP divisions. Part of what we know is that people are accessing those supports to be able to pay their rent when they need to, or pay other expenses. But what we know is behind this is that people are going to need supports. People are going to need supports around housing shortly when those moratoriums go away. And we kind of know that anecdotally right now because we're taking a lot of calls about it. People are calling us, and it starts out with something like, I've never called DSS before in my life, but I'm really concerned because I lost my job. I know that, currently I'm not paying rent because of the moratorium, but I know that I'm going to be in trouble. So we know that's coming. We just haven't seen that bump yet, other than with that homeless population.
So in the caseload that you have estimated and staffing, you've taken that somewhat into consideration based off of the homeless population that we have right now and the expectation. So you feel that the staffing is sufficient to cover the expected increase?
We do. We've really worked in the last year and a half to, especially in our special services division that handles housing emergencies, we have really worked to streamline a lot of their processes. And we have some great people doing great casework and getting people both hooked up with vouchers, but also really doing some great casework to get people situated in permanent housing as quickly as we can, and relying on the programs that support that. So yes, I think we've really tried to take some of that kind of stuff into consideration. Nobody knows exactly how big the need is going to be, but I think we've done the best we can to assess that.
And one last super quick question. Have you found that the community outreach worker has helped get people into services and helped with some of the case management and support? Is there collaboration between the community outreach worker program and DSS?
So we work with the community outreach worker in a number of different capacities. I think that that position can be a huge help to really assist people that are homeless in getting specifically hooked up with the housing voucher programs. That's been a huge help. We work with the community outreach worker program pretty closely in a number of different divisions. I can't say specifically that it always results in permanent housing, but I think that all of those efforts contribute in the long run to doing the best we can. Sometimes it means getting people just into sheltering. Sometimes it means getting people hooked up with a housing voucher, and sometimes that results in stable housing.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Henry Granison.
Yes, thanks for the presentation, Kit. I assume there's no changes in Code Blue this year?
So we are hoping that Code Blue stays stable. I think that we know right now that the Code Blue will probably be subject to the 20% withhold that the state is imposing on state aid. Beyond that, we have not heard anything further, but that's kind of the best that we know right now. We're moving forward, and no changes have come regulatorily. So, we are still expected to provide those services to the community.
What do you mean by withholding 20%? How would that work?
Well, that's currently what the state is doing with most state aid, is they are withholding on basically on any of the claims that are submitted. They are withholding 20% of any of that state aid. That's what at least is proposed. I think we are just beginning to get more information about that.
Okay. Also, in terms of the churches that are not being used to house the homeless this year, is there any physical difference between the churches and the shelter?
So the big difference with the church is that in all of those settings, we were using things like open spaces like gymnasiums, or just an open room where people would put up cots and they would have a congregate sheltering experience. Even within our shelter currently, we have eliminated the congregate room. So the shelter is at a decreased capacity compared to last year, because really currently it's too risky to have people all in the same room within close proximity. And in most of these situations, it is just too complicated. If you were to try to put people far enough away, you still have to employ the same number of staff to be able to monitor and care for people. But now the job is much harder in terms of people being at a greater distance, and it can present real challenges because your numbers of people, even in a congregate setting, go way down because of risk of the virus. So we've really stopped all of that and don't see a way forward with that right now. That's something that really across the state largely is happening, unless people have a facility that accommodates that differently, which we don't.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Dan Klein, and then I have a question, and then maybe we can wrap up and go to the next department. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about OTR 53 for the DAP program, Dispositional Alternatives Program. I just can't tell from the wording and the numbers. Is that OTR restoring the current funding level?
Yes, it is. Yep. Yep.
Thanks, Dan. Kit, my question goes back to the housing issue, and we heard today at HED that the the rental assistance program that's being funded by our CDBG money for county residents, and the city has money also, and that's going. Both of those are going through INHS. Are any of these folks? I mean, are you making sure to funnel anybody who's even possibly eligible into that, because they still have money that they haven't used?
Yes, we worked with them. We worked with them very extensively when that program was getting up and running, to come up with basically a way to screen people so that money would be, so that whether or not people were eligible for that program would be assessed first. And then we could look at, they would go ahead and refer on if they were not. Again, part of what I think is happening with that program, Martha, is that I think we are not seeing a full utilization of that program because the eviction moratorium is still in place. I anticipate that people will really be accessing that at higher levels as soon as that goes away. Not that I want that to happen, but I think that will be the turning of the tide, if you will, for people accessing that.
Okay, thanks, Kit. Jason, you had your hand up?
I did. I just wanted to point out one thing that is, I think, worth mentioning. The COPS OTRs, some of them have been balanced with rollover, right, Kit?
They have.
So these were formerly Target programs supported by Target, and that's roughly around 500,000, maybe a little bit less of roll. Is that right about rollover? You got my numbers right, Tom and Kit? Or is it a little bit less? You're on mute, Tom.
Thanks, and sorry. I'd have to check that figure, Jason. I don't have it off the top of my head.
The reason I bring it up is that, these are preventative programs. Kit kind of talked about cost savers, or what you may call as cost avoidance down the road, which is very hard to determine and understand. But these are preventative programs, and continuing them is an important element. And it's probably important to monitor these programs and their successes. But as we come in subsequent years, two things may or may not happen. If the COPS funding is reduced further, we're going to be faced with making the decision of, do we continue to fund them and slowly incorporate them back into the target budget, which is probably what I would recommend over the next 2 to 3 years, or do you not continue the programs? So I just want to bring that to your attention, because it's a large, it's generally a targeted funded series of programs. The preventative services, they're valuable. But right now they're balanced with rollover, which means in a perfect year, perfect situation, every maybe year for the next 2 or 3 years, we would slowly incorporate portions of that back into the target budget. What may offset that or make it more challenging is the COPS funding in general may decrease more than what it already has in the past. So I just want to draw that to your attention.
So Jason, that looks like OTRs 44, 42, 43, and 45. And
Right.
you also got the STEP program with rollover. That's another 110.
Right. So the STEP program you generally support with one time. I think it's usually in the order of 40,000 or 45,000 every year. If you remember this current fiscal year, we came to you in the springtime, or maybe it was late winter, I don't remember, saying, listen, we've had a huge demand. You took some contingency funds and we supported that program. I think it's been very successful. So this is a little bit more than the annual OTR that you usually do. And I think it may pay off dividends in the extent that of what Kit just talked about, with folks almost kind of pre-inquiring about, how do I do this if I have to? This program may get utilized more than we expect. So point being is that that's a normal program you usually do through OTRs. You have been, at least for the past several years. The COPS are not. So similar to what you'll see in other departments where we talk about incorporating, like, for example, the vehicles that Tom just talked about, that's one time where the expectation is over the next several years, we'll slowly bring that back into target. And because it's, constant replacement of vehicles is an important piece of the puzzle. But the COPS program, I think, is going to be faced with that same type of approach.
Yes.
All right, we got Jason.
That's it. I just want to make you aware of that and make sure you're aware of it.
Thank you for pointing that out, Jason. Appreciate it.
It looks like I lost internet briefly, so, okay. Thank you, Jason. These are hard, these are really important programs and lots of big numbers. Is there any, Deborah's got your hand up? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Martha. Yeah, I appreciate how difficult making any kind of cuts is, especially with this particular department and these particular programs. I guess the thing that kind of distressed me when I looked at this was, we said, Jason said we needed to make structural changes in county government. And we were supposed to be looking at 12% cuts across the board to the extent that we could manage. And social services ends up with more than it had this year. And I'm wondering if it would be possible to take some of these OTRs and make them one time, whether for a year or two, for some of these programs, rather than keeping them in target. Because if we're aiming for a structural change, increasing target doesn't seem to me to do it. And we might be able to make these one-time programs and then reevaluate them in a year or two. I think that would give me less heartburn than, adding that, taking 12% out and then adding $440,000 in target OTRs back in.
I can ask Jason, I see your hand, Anna. Jason, now the FTEs have gone down by two people.
Yeah.
Kit, at the beginning, you said that the increase in fringe rate, I think of 2%, and with 180 or so people, that's a lot of people. Those dollars add up. Either one of you or Tom, is that the main reason for the dollar increase, even though FTEs went down?
Fringe is probably a good part of it, or it's some part of it. I can speak to the bigger question you asked earlier, but Tom, it looks like you might have something to say.
Sure. The net local cost increase associated with the increased fringe rate is just about $100,000, a little bit more than $100,000. It's not at all the main contributing factor to the increased budget. The main contributing factors are in our mandate programs.
Yeah.
And as Kit referenced, I think it's about $1 million roughly in increased local cost for safety net cases and emergency shelter. I believe it's about $600,000 in increased local cost for foster care, adoption subsidies, and Committee on Special Education placements. There might be one more that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but the main drivers of our local cost increase are in our mandate programs, not in our discretionary areas.
Is that $1 million for everything, or $1 million plus 600,000?
Those are two separate items.
So
Put it another way.
What, Jason?
I was going to say, if there wasn't some of the changes to Medicaid, you'd have probably another $1 million on top of an increase of mandated costs, because that brought it down a little bit.
So these two, overall, the mandate increase is 1.6 million net local costs this year.
Well, actually, it's more than that, because there are additional, the foster care block grant was reduced by about $144,000. So there are some additional costs there as well.
May I clarify something to answer what you asked, Martha? So in our mandates altogether, taken all together, the year-to-year increase in net local cost is $170,000. The areas where our cost is increasing are the ones that I named. And as Jason observed, those are largely, but not entirely, offset by savings in the Medicaid area. But all of those are in the realm of mandates.
I can just speak to the bigger piece of this. Deborah, your point is well taken. The challenge with this is, I think first of all, DSS is one of the more difficult departments to talk about, because it has a lot of mandated impacts that you have no control over. But I think your suggestion about, about reorganization or structural change, the COPS program is essentially in a position where you're going to have to evaluate over the next few years to determine whether or not you want to continue it. And that's put in that one-time concept, which is what you were referring to. The other thing I would just offer is that you can go through a massive overhaul now, but I have a feeling that come January and what happens by the end of March is going to then dictate where I think that direction of change is going to go, because I have a feeling the state the state is going to push down, I think, sweeping changes across the board in many different areas, which is probably going to have many, many pressure points throughout your budget. Just for example, is what's going to happen with TC3 is going to impact what you're going to be doing across different areas of the budget. And most definitely, I would find it highly probable that the governor will take another swipe at Medicaid reform through some form or fashion, which is going to require you to kind of look at the budget from a bigger perspective and say, all right, if I'm getting increases in these areas here, it's going to require to change something else elsewhere. So I don't think, while there are quite a bit of reinstatements through OTRs with this, your social services are going to have huge demands over the course they have at it. They're going to continue to have it. You do have some groundwork laid to make changes, right? Like for example, the COPS program. And I have a feeling you're going to have plenty of opportunities to make changes once the state budget is adopted. And I don't know, the problem with all of this is we don't know what that's going to be. You're going to hear from Frank in a little bit from the mental health and public health. He's going to be right next to being negatively impacted. Probably it's going to be DSS, health and public health. And those are your two that are going to those are your three departments that are going to get hit the hardest through these changes. So I think your point's well taken. It's just I think we've made some changes and we've started to lay some groundwork, but if you go in one direction, you may have to totally reverse course depending on what the state does in the next few months.
Okay. Kit, I don't mean to pick on you. I know that you're in a terrible position in your department, just in terms of vastly reduced resources and hugely increasing needs. So,
I mean, we keep the lights out just because it's, it's all money over there. We turn the lights off for once in a while to save money. That's how bad it is.
I keep sitting too still and my automatic light goes out. I don't feel picked on at all, Deborah. And I if I were in your shoes, I would be asking the same questions. I appreciate the challenges that abound this year, and thank you, thank you for all the consideration that all of you will have to be putting forth for all of this. We're all in a rough situation, and the big thing we're trying to do is make sure that we keep families supported in all the ways that we can within our community. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anna Kellis.
Oh, sorry. Actually, Jason, you mostly answered my questions. I'm just, something we'll watch. Deborah, it was a really important question. I appreciate that you asked it. It's just heartbreaking. This is the one area where, because of what we're going through, the needs are going to be the greatest. The state cuts might be the greatest simultaneously. So just very nervous, and we'll just keep watching. And thank you for all the work you do.
I've got a couple of things quickly. First, to finish up this point, the vast majority of what we spend are bills out the door. We don't have any choice about, if people are eligible, the money has to be spent. So by cutting, all we're doing is making people wait longer for what they're eligible for. Right. And in some cases, actually, violating mandated deadlines you have to respond by such and such a time. And so we get at risk of being fined for being too slow. That's kind of the dilemma we're in. I would appreciate, Tom, if you could put together a one-pager, like this is the plus column and this is the minus column. Whether it's these are the mandates that have gone up since last year, and these are since 2020, our projections, and these are where we see increases in reimbursements. Maybe it's just the one number for Medicaid. It'd be great to see that on one page, because that's something where the public, I think it's important that we're very clear about that with the public, since it's such a big cost and a big part of our mission. Jason, do you, looking at this, do you think we ought to be looking at more into the contingent fund? Especially maybe with
I'm in a position where I don't think you can add enough to the contingent fund, but that you're going to have this is a similar conversation you're going to have in the next several budget sessions. So the EBC meetings aren't going to get easier. So as you want to add, I'm just being candid. As you want to add more to the contingent fund, I can tell you right now, yes, I would love to, but that's just going to mean, that's going to be balanced with increasing property taxes more or cutting positions elsewhere, programs elsewhere. So, I mean, that's the basics of it. I'm putting $1 million additional in contingency, I think, is a huge effort on our part. I wish I would be able to say with confidence that it's going to cover it, but I can't. So I think that's something you'll have to keep in mind as you go through this some more. And as you know, just so you know too, as we go through this more in the EBC meetings, and as we know more as to how September finishes and how October starts, come the end of October, we'll have a little better of a picture than we do now. A month away will give us more information, and we'll be mulling this over more, and we may come to you with some other changes that may provide more security. But right now, putting in doubling, would do more than doubling your contingent fund is a good move. Is it enough? I have no idea. Would I love to put more? If I could have put 2 million more, I would have. But I just can't.
All right. Thank you very much, Kit and Tom and Dina. Really appreciate all of you and all your department, all your staff holding these things and holding our families together. So thank you.
Thank you.
So move to public health, and that starts on page 4-78. And there's one OTR. Hello, Frank. I saw someone, there's Brenda. Hello. Hi. Welcome.
Great. Thanks, Martha. Brenda's here. Jeremy Porter's listening into for help with this and the mental health side as well. They do the heavy lifting. I just get to come talk to you about it. So thank you to them. Let me, I guess I'm supposed to share the presentation. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Here is share. Maybe. There we go. Oh, I don't want that. Hold on. There we go. Okay. Can you guys see the slide?
That looks good. Thank you.
All right. So you know who I am, where I work. I gotta shrink you guys. All right. So this is our recommended budget for the health department. Obviously, you guys know what's been going on this year. It's everyone in the department's been called upon for COVID. We're obviously now talking about 2021 with the hope that we might be doing some of the stuff we used to do in a more consistent manner. So the changes that you see here, the 311 in expenditures, the bulk of that is around salary and fringe. So we have 6 positions in the department that are a reduction in hours that is included in this budget. I'll talk a bit about the OTR in a minute. So all of those, 5 of the 6 will be a reduction down to 35 hours from either 40 or 37.5, and those are all in our environmental health division. One of the 6 is an actual reduction from 35 to 17.5 hours. So it's taking a full-time position to a part-time position. There are 4.5 FTEs that have been eliminated from the budget for next year. They are spread out throughout the department. There's only 1 person currently that is impacted by those 4.5 positions, and obviously is being offered another role in the department. Stream water quality monitoring, I think you all have received a few emails about that contract. It is a $28,000 contract with CSI. We took over that from the planning department, I think in 2020. It might have been 2019, but it made sense. We felt like it fit with our environmental health work that we were doing, but when we looked at what we needed to do to get to our 12% reduction, unfortunately, we were not able to include. And then the last piece, which is a relatively small piece, is our physically handicapped children's program. It's about $8,000. We split that. 4,000 of it is us and 4,000 is from the state. We have not spent that money in about 4 years, mainly because the needs can be met through our other mandate accounts. and we really continued to budget for it because it was state money, and we wanted to match it and make sure it remained in our budget. But this year, we eliminated that in order to realize a little bit of savings. So that is the bulk of that is the reduction that you see. The division directors played a role in identifying within their divisions. We set them all out with a 12% reduction goal, and they came back with what they thought made the most sense to be able to still do the work that needs to get done. The reality is the work still needs to get done, even with fewer resources, fewer hours, and we're just going to have to be creative in how we accomplish that. Our revenue change is mostly related to state aid. So many of those positions where we're reducing hours, we get a small portion of state aid connected to that. So anytime we make changes, the way public health is funded, just a quick reminder, our state aid, we get a base grant of $650,000 where the state pays 100% of our allowable costs through Article 6 state aid. Once we get past that $650,000, they only pay 36%. So for much of this reduction, it falls into that 36% where we lose a portion of state aid for doing that. The FTEs I talked a bit about. It is a 4.5 position change. We have a community health nurse position, a public health technician position, an account clerk typist, an information aide are all being eliminated, and a keyboard specialist position is being reduced to half-time, and that makes up the 4.5 FTE change. Our over target request that is supported by the recommended budget. This was essentially restoring the reductions we put into the Children with Special Care Needs unit. Those are the folks that do our early intervention and pre-K program. There were 13 individuals that were to be impacted, and they were going to be going down 2.5 hours each a week in order to meet their target. These are the folks, the nurses mainly, that have been supporting our nurses and community health services doing the COVID response, on top of still trying to make sure that the children with developmental disabilities and delays are getting the services that they need to be successful. So these folks have been working long hours, quite honestly, some weeks doing 2 full-time jobs in order to achieve what we needed to for the department. And so we are very appreciative that this was able to be included in the target budget as an OTR. And that's all that I have for information. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Thanks very much, Frank. And if you want to unshare your screen.
Sure, yep.
Deborah Dawson.
Yeah, hi Frank, how are you?
Good.
So what I'm hearing is that some employees in environmental health had their hours reduced.
Correct.
And what functions did they serve?
It's essentially the leadership in the division, our director and 2 senior public health sanitarians. We did also reduce 1 public health sanitarian down to 35 hours. So it's essentially making everyone in the division 35 hours now. Over the last couple of years, we had increased hours, particularly in the leadership team, because we actually shrunk the leadership team in a reorganization process. So it was the decision of the division leadership that this was the most appropriate way to achieve the reductions. The other position impacted is our health and safety coordinator. So you may know Mark Freibel. He does the health and safety for the whole county, for our county employees. We had a conversation with him, and getting to 35 hours was okay and appropriate to help us.
So cuts in environmental health staff and cutting the CSI contract was simply the most readily available way to get to 12%?
Yeah, I mean, county support is a big part of what we do, and to get to the numbers we needed to, again, the division directors and their leadership teams were the ones that kind of went through what made the most sense. We're already pretty lean on the things that we spend money on related to those positions. So any other reductions that we would have done would have made it almost impossible for them to do the work that they need to do. So this really seemed to be the most effective way to get to the goal of the 12%.
Okay.
Ann Corman.
Thank you, Martha, and thank you, Frank. So for the positions, another question on the positions that are going to be eliminated. Did those people leave with early retirement?
One left with retirement. One was vacant already. One, the position, they actually moved into a higher level position in the division. And one was a layoff. That is going to be offered another position, but.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Another position in your department?
Yes.
Yes, for that particular one, yes.
Okay. So anybody else? I don't see any other hands. So so when you say these other cuts had to happen, so those remain. Did those cuts happen in 2020, or is this just, they didn't happen mid-year? These are the proposed cuts for next year.
Correct. In fact, we've increased some of the hours of those people this year, I think, within that division, just because of the demand on environmental health from a COVID response, while also trying to do their normal environmental health work. But for 2021, we would actually realize those reductions.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking, is that they're actually doing more.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's a real contribution, a leadership contribution to take a pay cut. And makes me sad. And I guess I have to say I appreciate it. Where would I find, Sean, I'll see you. I've got one other question. Where would I find the CSI contract in my pages here? I'm not sure which section it's in, and is it?
Martha, if you look on page 487 under environmental health professional services, there's a cut from 61,678 in 2020 to 33,678 in 2021, and that amounts to exactly $28,000. So I think that's probably where it is.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. Shauna?
Hi, Frank. Whenever I saw the cut for environmental health, I was definitely concerned, because I'm obviously on the Board of Health and see all of the restaurants and everything that environmental health does in our county. And on the 2 years that I've been on the board, I also see the significance of their role, and how whenever they walk into restaurants, the violations, the conversations that they have with restaurant owners, those conversations keep us safe and healthy. And I guess I'm concerned because I know that we haven't lost restaurants per se. And while things look differently right now, I'm definitely concerned because I don't want to see people get sick in a different way. Can you talk a little bit about that and comfort me a little bit as to us keeping people healthy?
I'll try. I agree with you. The same thing that applied to the nurses and CSCN. Environmental health has been instrumental in our COVID response on top of the EH work that they have to do. It's the reality of having less resource. We'll have to figure out how to get it done. We'll likely be working with the state on evaluating how frequently we need to get to different types of facilities for inspections, and those kind of things. To Martha's point, the leadership took the cut in their time, which hopefully allows the sanitarians who are in the field doing the inspections to be able to continue to do that. But they don't do it alone. They need leadership in order to, navigate the daily issues that come up in order for them to be successful. So these are horribly difficult decisions to have to make. It does go to their credit that when they were given the opportunity to give feedback on how to make these reductions, this is what they came up with.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Frank. Anything else for public health? Right, then Frank, switch hats. We're moving on. Thank you, Brenda, very much. And good to have you. And Jeremy, as you're staying. Mental health, page 132 in section 4.
Let me get it up here again. Oh, hold on. Did that wrong. I think as much as I'm on Zoom, I'd have this figured out by now. Let's see here. Slideshow from the beginning. There we go. Okay. So, hi, I'm Frank Rupa, Tompkins County Mental Health. So this budget, the bulk of what we're going to be talking about here today is health homes. I have a slide about that later. But from the expenditure component, about $1 million of that is related to health homes. And I think about 800,000 related to revenue. So that's the bulk of what we'll talk about. There are no other unplanned position changes, reduction in hours or anything like that, like we just talked about with public health. The decision on health homes really allowed us to keep our other programming whole. In this, obviously there is more than just health homes in the expenditure line. You may remember when we were talking about 2020's budget, we were heading in a really positive direction around our revenue generation at the department and our sustainability efforts. And we had plugged in some one-time costs to replace some very old furniture in our building in an effort to spend what we were hopeful about positive revenues on a one-time cost in case they weren't realized. We could always not spend that money and then look to the future to invest that in more ongoing if it did prove to be a long-term trend and improvement. So we removed about $100,000 from that furniture line. We didn't spend it this year either for obvious reasons. So that was a place that we were able to realize some significant savings that doesn't impact the necessarily direct provision of of services. Sorry, I gotta switch note sheets. There is some moving parts within the budget. We were within our medical staff, our psychiatrists and nurse practitioners. One of our psychiatrists has moved out of the county, is going to be providing telehealth services for us, but at reduced hours. We were able to create and hire a second nurse practitioner position to help fill in some of the need for prescribing and medical staff support. In doing that, we used some of the hours from a contract with a psychiatrist who is no longer with us, and we eliminated a community mental health nursing position. That this was a homegrown nurse practitioner. She worked with us as a nurse while going to school, and then when she became a nurse practitioner, we promoted her. Unfortunately, she has since left, but we are now recruiting for a nurse practitioner to make that change. So there's small amounts of dollars in there with a little bit of savings that occurred. But really across the board, we're pretty much holding steady in our pros and clinic programming because we were able to realize the savings we needed to through health homes. I will point out that the 12% reduction was applied to all of our contract agencies that receive county funding. You can see that in the contract agency component of the budget book. It's relatively small amounts because the county, most of our contracts are for state funds, but over the years there's been some county funding invested in some of our contracts, but I wanted to make sure that I drew that to your attention as well. Our FTE change, 10 of this is related to health homes. The other 1.2 FTEs, the 0.2 is the psychiatrist that I mentioned that is reducing her hours as she's moved out of the county and is going to be providing telehealth service for us at reduced hours. And the full FTE change is a planned change. This was for our rep payee program. So we've had one person doing rep payee for mental health clients for a long time. And she retired at the beginning of the year. So we have been planning for that retirement with DSS and have transitioned all of those clients to the rep payee program over at DSS. So it really was a shifting from us to them. They do rep payee at a much larger level. They have supervision and experts that do that work. And as we were losing someone that had done it for a very long time, it didn't seem like it was the most responsible thing to try to fill that position in our department when DSS was already expert at doing it. So that transition has already occurred, and it was a planned transition. So really the change here is related to health homes. So over target requests supported by the recommended budget. The first one is our wellness court coordinator. This is mental health court, and this will be year 3. I believe that we're moving into. The court has been wildly successful. I have asked the city to also include their contribution as well. We've been fortunate that the mental health budget has not called upon these funds in the first 2 years because we were able to support it. But this year, obviously, it's a different situation, and we're definitely going to need the funding. They did apply for a grant with the federal government that would be a 3-year grant that would cover this cost as well as expand to another position to support the court. But we won't know about that for another couple of months on whether they were successful on the grant. You may remember that our ultimate goal was to have the Office of Court Administration take on this position, but obviously that's not going to happen in 2021. And this program has been wildly successful and quite frankly is saving the county significantly more money than we would be investing in this position. The second OTR, which of course is the largest one, is the discontinuation of our health home program. I asked Jeremy to add that smaller box that kind of talks to you about the numbers that would have come out of the first slide, so you could see the amounts and then the target savings. The health homes program, we transitioned to health homes in 2013 when the state made a shift from OMH, or Office of Mental Health supported case management, to this new health home model. And the county has subsidized that contract. It's it is now a contract with Surcare, which is the Health Home of New York contractor that the state has selected for our region. And then they subcontract with us to provide the service. We've been doing that since 2013. We have not been successful in eliminating the county contribution. Oops. And apparently Dewar doesn't pay for the lights either. Anyways, I'll keep going.
Just our cost saving efforts, just so you know, this is what we're doing.
So Health Homes, as it was is a contract that we provide. The health home will have to contract with another entity in order to maintain these services in our community. I've already had a couple reach out to me about expanding what they're doing. Southern Tier Care Coordination, which is a component of STAP, already provides these services in Tompkins County. And there's another agency from the region that is interested in expanding. So these services will not go away. Honey is required to make them to make sure that the services are available to the members. The challenge, quite frankly, is I believe we pay our employees in this program what is appropriate pay for the work that they're doing. And with the reimbursement model that the state created for this program, it will never achieve sustainability. It would always require county support, even if we were maximizing every dollar we could get. And that's really why we came to this conclusion. We were already evaluating this program. I believe last year, budget time, we talked about it and I asked for a little bit more time. But because we feel like we would not get to sustainability, and with the unknown of what the state might do, I don't think reimbursements are going to be going up in the near future. It really felt like this was the appropriate time to take this program, allow Surcare to contract with another agency, and then use the county contribution for the safety net programs in the clinic and pros, that if they were to stop, nobody else really would be required to step in for. So while this is tragic for the employees that work in the program, the staff, the members that are used to working with our health home, in order to prioritize programming that would not otherwise be done, I felt like this was the most appropriate decision for the department to make the cuts that needed to be made.
Thank you, Frank. Is that your last slide?
Yeah, that's the last slide.
Yeah, I think the idea of if somebody else can pick it up, that makes it a lot easier for us. Shauna? Yeah, and Frank, if you want to just jump up and down to get the lights back.
Across the room, my apologies. It's a big room here at Dewar.
He's saving electricity.
I was trying.
So waving your hand above your head doesn't do it.
It doesn't even work in this room. You got to get up and walk.
Okay, good exercise. Shauna?
Yeah, I have two questions. The first one is, the one concern that I receive quite often in regards to mental health is that it takes a while for people to get in to see a psychiatrist. And so whenever I see a cut in our psychiatry hours, this makes me concerned. Can you talk about why we're doing that?
Yeah, so it really just has to do with the individual. We are recruiting for a full-time psychiatrist right now that is in the budget. And so we agree, we would like to have more psychiatry hour. We're also recruiting to fill that vacant nurse practitioner. So at full staff, we would have 2 full-time nurse practitioners, a full-time psychiatrist, and our full-time medical director. So that is our goal. So we agree with you.
Okay, so just to confirm, we have never been at full staff. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, it's kind of fluctuated. We contracted for a while when I first came to mental health, and that person left. We set up another contract, and that person has since left. We increased a nurse practitioner. We used to only have 1. We now have 2. So when we had this person internally get her credentials, we created a new nurse practitioner position, and we have two psychiatrists long-term, Dr. Lippert, our medical director, and Dr. Miller as a psychiatrist. She's the one that has left the community and will be doing telemedicine. So really, we are just shuffling the cards to have as much medical staff time as we can. If we get the psychiatrist position filled and the nurse practitioner filled full-time, that will actually be more medical staff hours than we had in previous years.
Okay. And then my second question is, in searching for a director of mental health, is that the position, is that the title, Frank?
Deputy? Oh, the
Deputy.
clinic director or the deputy?
Yes. I was wondering, do we need to do any type of allocation for the recruiting of this position? I know it's been tenuous looking for someone, and we've really struggled with that. And, you know, I'm assuming at some point we might need to do, you know, a bigger search, which costs a lot of money. And I'm hoping, you know, it sounds like we really, really, really need to hire this position sooner than later.
So it was recently reposted. I believe it closed just recently, or is it closing any day now? So we will review applications again. Unfortunately, we did hire a recruitment firm back in March, I think it was, to help us find candidates, and that wasn't very fruitful. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't do it again, but you know, with COVID and everything else going on, and this budget, before we made the health home decision, I wasn't sure what I was going to be recommending, right? So we also didn't want to recruit people into positions that might not be there, you know, as we go forward, because these are some difficult decisions we're making. So yeah, I agree with you. We are committed to getting that deputy position filled. Jeremy very much wants that deputy position filled. And so we're doing everything we can. And if we do need to invest some resources, we'll certainly ask for those.
Okay, I mean, I just want to make sure that I know that, you know, typically you look at that posting, and quite honestly, that salary is not competitive. And I think that's the reason why we're not getting good candidates. I mean, we can keep, you know, posting the same position over and over again with the same salary, but it might make sense to actually increase the salary so we get good candidates.
Yeah, that's a big conversation, Sean.
I know it is.
That it's challenging in, but I hear you, and certainly HR and Jason have been extremely supportive in helping us try to get somebody in there, and I'm sure we'll make whatever changes or steps we need to take in order to get it filled.
It's great. Thank you.
All right. Deborah Dawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if this is a question for Frank or for Jason, but these employees that we're losing because of the discontinuation of this health homes program, are they among the employees who are going to be rehomed to another position?
I believe out of the 10 positions, there are 7 that are currently filled, and they have all been identified. We've identified other positions for them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I wanted to ask about, since you say we have the psychiatrist who was here is going to be providing some telehealth hours, is that something you might consider for the recruitment? If it's sort of legendary that you can't get certain specialists or psychiatrists to come to rural areas. Is that something we could do, like literally, you know, that's their job, is to do telehealth?
Yeah, there are. So yes, we are committed to telehealth moving forward. We've applied to make telehealth permanent to our license, so we're going through that process. Quite frankly, we're concerned about the day that they tell us we can't do it by telephone anymore, because a large portion of our clients have taken advantage of being able to do teletherapy using the telephone without the video. But yes, it is the future. Dr. Miller, quite frankly, if you'd have asked her 2 years ago if she would do telemedicine, it probably would have been a hell no. But she has embraced it, and now that she's done it, I think everyone is getting more comfortable with things. And so, yes, the only challenge and the reason that we continue to recruit for a full-time person is for the eventuality of other retirements, needing a medical director, those kind of things. But we will be looking at telemedicine for everything that we do moving forward. The challenge is that you have to have some in person because telemedicine doesn't work for everybody. And then how do you get a part-time psychiatrist when it's extremely difficult to get a full-time psychiatrist? So we're working through all of those mechanisms, and certainly telemedicine will be part of it.
All right, thank you very much, Frank. Anything else on mental health? All right, thank you. Go enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you, Jeremy.
Hey, actually, I have one question. Sorry, I was trying to figure out my hands. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Frank, have you gotten any? Jason's laughing at me. Yes, I am. I'm tech. I'm a Luddite all of a sudden. But have you gotten any indication from the state or federal, from any systems that that we will eventually lose the ability to do telehealth from insurance companies? Have you gotten any word, or is this something that could potentially be permanent?
No, telehealth, it will be permanent. We were already moving towards telehealth before COVID. And like I said, we were in the process of applying to amend our license to include telehealth before COVID even happened. So telehealth is here to stay. Telephone therapy is new, right? That was a relief that was provided because of COVID. And so we have to see long-term. One, we also need to know about the efficacy, right? We don't want to just do something because it's easier for us to do. It needs to be as effective. And then two, whether or not the state and federal government will allow us to continue to do telephonic. But telehealth, video health is here to stay, and we plan to incorporate it into our practice.
But for the telephonic, we have heard nothing about whether or not that will continue post-COVID. Okay.
No, we don't even know. They only renew it every month, and they do it the day before it's about to expire. So we're sitting on pins and needles until that midnight executive order comes out about the extension each month.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
All right. We are moving on to the Office for the Aging. We're not quite as far behind as we were. So I'd ask if people need a 5-minute break, or should we plow through? Thumbs up if you want a break. There are 2 breaks and a lot of black boxes, so I don't know how to judge that. Lisa, do you mind if we pause here for a few minutes?
No, that's totally fine.
All right, let's all be back in front of our screens at 20 after 7. Thank you. All right, folks, if we can start to file back in or on. Are we in or on? Welcome back. If I could just take a moment and share a little something that my husband and I are both enjoying. Can you read that? Ross Gay's Book of Delights.
I just got that. That's awesome.
It's really good medicine. There are essays that are just maybe a page and a half, 2 pages long, and will just take you out of everything else you're thinking about to transport you to other places. Literally a delight a day. Just, I would urge people to pick that one up. All right, with that, that's my mental health note.
So good.
Good. Page 41, Office for the Aging. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. I just wanted to introduce Bob Slocum is here, our fiscal coordinator, helped do this magic with these numbers here. And Karen Bullis, deputy director, she's pretty much the glue that holds our team together. So thanks for joining us.
Great, welcome.
I'll share my screen. Can you see that okay?
Yes, and can you make it go into presentation?
Yep, how's that?
Good, perfect.
Okay, so our mission, is to assist older adults and persons with long-term care needs to live independently in their homes and communities with quality of life and dignity. The programs and services that we provide have become even more important in the midst of the pandemic. Although we're doing things a little bit differently and found some creative ways to provide these services, our mission, remains the same. Sorry about that. So this is the slide that you guys are all so familiar with. It shows the changes we have here. The major change is come from a personnel decrease, which I'll talk about in a second, but also some cuts in our home care services, which really bring us in line with the actual spending of what we have been spending in the past. The revenue decrease is just a trend, basically less income in our PERS program, which is our personal emergency response program, and also client contributions have been down, they're trending down, and also an end of the Care Compass grant, which ended in September of this year. So those are those changes. We did have a reduction of 1.5 full-time FTE reduction, which brings our staff members down to 13 in the office, 10 full-time, 3 part-time. The one full-time position was a relatively new position started in 2018 as a front office position. And in light of the pandemic, the way we structured our front office and the service structure completely changed. The role has significantly, the need for the role has decreased as we're not getting that in-person foot traffic and different things like that. And we've found alternative ways to just take up those, some of the tasks that are left over with our current staff. The other position was a part-time seasonal outreach worker that basically worked on our HEAP program. It was a little bit different of position because this wasn't a furloughed position. It was a position where the person resigned every year after the program ended, which they resigned in April. So basically we just didn't bring them back on this year. And then the 0.5 hours will be, or 0.5 halftime position will be taken out of the 2021 budget is what we're looking at. This slide is a little busy, but basically it goes over, although this is a pretty straightforward budget, aside from that nearly 12% cut, our budget itself can be kind of complicated. We do administer 28 programs. We have 32 contracts. We have 12 subcontractors. 22 funding streams across 4 different fiscal years. So it can get a little convoluted. And again, shout out to Bob Slocum for helping us figure all that out. But you can see here that I'll start with the yellow piece of the pie is our New York Connects program. It's 100% state funded. It's 11% of our budget. It really is providing information, assistance, referral, and options counseling. The orange piece of the pie is the nutrition services. That is 32% of our budget, 57% funded by state and federal money, 43% locally funded. And that's really to support subcontractor FoodNet to provide home delivered meals, congregate dining meals, which have, by the way, changed in light of COVID also. And those people that would congregate at the dining settings now are receiving home delivered meals. So nutrition education and nutrition counseling all fall into that nutrition services too. So the blue piece is our in-home care services. It's about 19% of our budget, 58% state funded, 42% local funded. The names of the programs that ISEP, we call it, Expanded In-Home Services for the Elderly program, which is the state portion of the funding, and the Title III-E, which is federally funded, and it is for caregivers and caregiver respite. So this funding goes toward our in-home assessments, our case management, personal care, housekeeping services, and respite care. And the biggest piece is the greenest section, which is all our other programs that we administer and plan for. It's 38% of the budget, 61% federal and state funded, 39% locally funded. It's our personal emergency response system, our caregiver services, our home energy assistance program, which we contract with DSS with to provide heat services for people over 60 or disabled. Health insurance counseling, our long-term care ombudsman program, friendly visiting, health promotion services, legal services, home repair, transportation, outreach, and our multicultural program, as well as the Red program, which is a aid listing run by the Finger Lakes Independence Center. So those are the program areas. I just wanted everybody to understand that when they're looking at the budget. And that's really all I have for you. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We really appreciate that. Whenever I've been on HHS and I see the different contract lines and the revenue streams, it's really hard to keep track.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. Questions from folks? So let me get, yeah, I took the participants off my screen. There we go. Is that Mike Lane? Go ahead.
Hi, Lisa, we appreciate it. The heat program, we've heard a little bit in the news about recently. How are we as far as funds for the heat program compared to the demand?
Well, that's a good question. I think I would have to throw that back at Kit because we subcontract with DSS. So it's interdepartmental funding. So we get what they provide to us, really. I don't know if Bob can answer any better with that, but we haven't seen a change yet.
Yeah, we supplement it with some local county funding for doesn't fully, the DSS contribution doesn't fully cover the cost of the program.
So you don't know whether there are people out there asking for HEAP that aren't able to receive it?
Not that we have seen. I mean, HEAP extended the entire year almost. Usually the HEAP program for us ends in April, but there was enough funding that they continued to extend it all the way through August. So I don't know what that will mean for next year, but we've been able to serve more people this year than in the past.
That's good news. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ann Corman?
Thank you. So I was wondering if, because of all the different programs that you have, will you have difficulty keeping up with some of these programs, or will you have to reduce any of your assistance to folks through any of these programs?
Hoping not to. really, we've had to switch gears as far as how we serve them. But I think, this year has been a really kind of a test for us to get that into gear. We've done a lot more virtually that we didn't think we'd be able to do, especially with some of the older population that doesn't have that ability, but we've come up with some creative ways to even do, like, for example, our personal emergency response system. We've been able to create a really simplified installation instruction sheet that we would deliver to them with the PERS machine, and then we can talk them through that process. So it's taken us a little bit longer with the services that we provide, but we're still able to provide them. And I think as we do it more, things will become a little bit more smooth, and we'll probably find even better ways.
Okay, great. And through the pandemic, have you had a backlog of people in different services that just you haven't been able to get to as fast?
Some of our subcontractors have. I mean, there's a pretty extensive waiting list with INHS. We subcontract with INHS for small home repair services. They've had there's a pretty long waiting list for that. For our in-home care services that we subcontract with DSS for case management, there are probably close to 20 people on the waiting list, but it's not necessarily because of the pandemic. It still reflects pre-COVID, the lack of aid shortage that's happening. So they're on this waiting list waiting to be served because we can't find aides to serve them. So it's not so much that we're not able to keep up with them.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Lisa. I was going to ask about about the HEAP program also. So you're eliminating the part-time seasonal person in your office. Is there anybody else in your office who still manages HEAP and helps people get connected?
Yeah, we have a full-time worker that works on that program when it's in, when it's open, when the HEAP season is open. So she works on that 100% of the time. And we also have 2 other people in our office that are capable and trained and worked on HEAP in the past that can pick up the slack if need be.
Okay, so this person was facilitating, but not the only connection to the program.
Correct.
Okay, and I'm really interested. You said the PERS program, you were able to make adjustments in the instructions and walk people through using it. I have been worried about all of us older folks having to figure out technology and, it not being our first language. So you're seeing people making the leap, and
sometimes with difficulty, and sometimes it takes a few calls, and we have to be a little bit more creative with, like, okay, is your neighbor available? Maybe the neighbor could come over. We can talk them through the instructions with them. So we found a lot of different ways. But, as far as the technology, we're actually working on something right now where we're trying to contract with a company to kind of do a pilot project with technology to set folks up with a tablet and connect them with Ithaca College gerontology students who will support that. And also there's a tech hotline for people. So it's not just that, during the pandemic, there are a lot of avenues for people, older people, and more older people than you think have devices and things. But the clients we serve, there's more of a gap with being able to afford the internet or being able to afford the device itself. So we're trying to fill that gap with this program. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of data comes from this and how we can move forward with it, because I'm pretty excited about it.
Mm-hmm. All right. That's all I have. Any other questions or comments for Lisa, Bob, and Karen?
I just have one comment, Martha. Most of you probably don't know this, but Karen was one of the several employees that was moved over to the EOC at the early days of the pandemic response for probably quite a bit of time. I don't know how much time, Karen, but I know she was with us at the beginning in March, and I just wanted to point that out. She spent quite a few weeks at the EOC working in the PIO team, and then slowly went back to her department. But just an example of another employee filling in and doing another role during a time of need. So Karen, how long were you with the EOC for full time and then on a part time?
Oh, I don't even know. Probably at least a good month, 2 months maybe, and then kind of started transitioning back into my role at COFA.
I'll just say it seemed like forever, Jason, okay?
Okay. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
I was going to say the longest month of your life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for
let you know that.
Thank you for being that kind of a team player. We really appreciate it. And thanks, Lisa, for letting her go.
Of course.
Right. Enjoy the rest of your day, folks. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks.
All right. Youth Services and Recreation. Kate Shanks Booth, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How y'all doing?
Great. And Teresa Albert. Hi.
Yeah, Teresa's here. Yeah. So everybody shake it off, stay awake. We'll be all right. So I'm going to present to you.
Page 217. You're going alphabetically.
Share my screen.
Page 217 and you're in section 4.
Hold on, I gotta share my screen. I think maybe. You guys see that? Probably not.
Yes.
Presentation. How do I?
If you can jump to presentation.
How do you jump to presentation? What am I not hitting?
So the slideshow at the top?
Slideshow from beginning. There, is that better?
Yeah, now figure out how to make that one slide instead of 2.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right, okay. So I'm going to be presenting to you the 2021 budgets for both Tompkins County Youth Services and the Rec Partnership tonight. I often get to say that I have the best job in Tompkins County because I get to work with 2 of the greatest people that I know. And so I want to acknowledge Teresa tonight. She's the heart of our department, and without her expertise of the last 30 years keeping us afloat, we probably would be in a lot of trouble. And I also want to acknowledge Bridget Nugent, my deputy director, who can't be with us tonight. She's traveling, but Jason was mentioning employees that stepped over at the EOC. Bridget did a heavy lift, and in some cases was working 80 hours a week to help with the EOC and planning, and then also doing work for our department on top of that. So I want to acknowledge them and just say thank you for that. The other thing I want to do is thank our Youth Service Advisory Board for their support, Jason, the county administrator, Lisa and Amy, and then just our local partners, those local agencies and municipalities who they just really work tirelessly to support the youth in Tompkins County with us. And now we'll get into the fun stuff. Next slide. So I thought I would begin with just a little bit of our mission. We invest time, resources, and funding into communities that enable all youth to thrive in school, work, and life. That kind of guides our decisions. What you have in front of you is the 2020 County Administrator's recommended budget for the Tompkins County Youth Services. In this 12% reduction scenario, the overall cumulative cost for our department was about $145,000. What I want to do here is take a little bit closer look at that $145,000 because I want to provide you a better understanding of what those cuts mean to us and to our department. Also, it highlights the rationale behind the decisions that we made in this budget process and provides some greater context for the FTE conversation that we'll have here in a little bit and the one OTR that I'm going to be offering to you guys a little bit later. We as a department break our budget down into 3 sections. We look at planning and coordination, agencies that we fund, and municipalities. And as you can see, as we take a closer look below that, each of those sections of our budget are responsible for about 33% of the reduction overall. First, we'll start with the planning and coordination. This typically includes things like salary, fringe, longevity payments, and also the expense line that cover our day-to-day operations like printing, office supplies, postage, renting our copier. Just to give you a little context, we typically run that day-to-day operations for our department for a year and on under $30,000. So why did I tell you that? Because I wanted to highlight that reducing in that area wouldn't be possible by just making some simple cuts. We were ultimately looking at reducing some staff. And that's important because it means that we've had to be creative. We've had to do some shifting of duties and rethink some things that we've done things a certain way. And so now we're having to be creative and look at those. Other things to note that in order to reach that almost $50,000 reduction, we did reduce those day-to-day expenditures to levels which were pretty significant. And we did that to ensure that we would have enough funding to provide for the full-time FTE that we are going to be filling in 2020. And also that understanding provides the context for the OTR that's going to come later. The second part of our budget that we look at is our agencies. We currently fund 9 programs across 5 different organizations. The thing to know about these and the municipalities is that they are required to make a 50% match for any money they receive from the county, which means in both cases, they're looking at about the impact of $47,000, but for them, that cut turns into about 71.5. So we looked at our agencies, we spread that out over all of them that we fund. That's typically how we try to do that to make sure that we aren't cutting one program over the other. The other thing to keep in mind here is we still don't know about our state aid. And so if that state aid comes, we'll have to reevaluate that practice, and based on that percentage and numbers, it may change that a little bit. And then again, the municipalities, their particular funding use their youth development programs, youth employment, childcare, and summer camps is typically what they use that for. Let's see, here's the next slide. The full-time equivalents with a 12% reduction scenario, we knew we were looking at reducing the positions. We had 2 FTEs in the title of Coordinator of Community Youth Service position at the beginning, which is why you see the 5 here in the 2020. One of those positions is vacant because of retirement, and we slashed the other one. We reduced that position in our budget for the 12% scenario, which means that we currently have 3 FTEs in the Youth Services Department, myself, Bridget, and Teresa. And we've been working and prepping and making sure that we can onboard that 4th person in 2021, because we thought that that was really important and really tied to the success of our programs moving forward. Right. So this is the over target request. As I mentioned in the first slide in the planning and coordination portion, we made some significant cuts. One of those that I want to highlight was the funding that we use to fund our monthly training series we provide to youth workers in Tompkins County. Keep in mind that these trainings are typically free to community partners, and they really fill the need because smaller nonprofits simply don't have the expansive lines in their budgets for those professional developments. Especially since COVID-19, we have seen that a lot of them are struggling to keep their doors open. But their staffs are still required to take they were required to meet certain requirements throughout the year to meet the state mandates for those states that regulate them. The other thing that these trainings do is they allow us to address important and emerging trends in youth development, and they also give access to the latest research and best practices in youth development for those who deal with the youth in Tompkins County. Just to give us highlight of some of the things we've covered in the last year in these. Let's see, we've talked about bullying, we've talked about vaping, eating disorders, LGBTQ+ issues, suicide, and resiliency. Like many other things that are ever changing around COVID-19, we believe that we've only begun to see the impacts of this health crisis on the youth in Tompkins County and their families. And we believe that the needs that are going to emerge over the next few months in this particular population are going to yet to be seen, and they'll continue to change. COVID-19 has added a level of complexity and urgency around the issues that we've already known about, and we have no doubt that there will be new issues that will be created in the future. This OTR will allow our department to continue to do these monthly trainings to make sure that we are relevant, but also address these new changes that are coming on the forefront, and to ensure that we are providing the best research and best practices for youth development to our community partners. That is what I have for youth services budget. Moving on to the rec partnership, just to recap, this is an interdepartmental, intermunicipal partnership that allows youth to participate in recreational programs. They can meet new friends, learn new skills, and have positive new experiences and well-supervised appropriate activities. By collaborating these pools and resources, the members of the partnership can offer a wider and more affordable array of recreational programs than any one particular municipality could offer on their own. Okay, so what you see before you on the slide now is the recommended budget for the 2021 Youth Recreational Partnership. In 2020, the total budget that was adopted by the partnership, by the board of the partnership, was $293,412. We'll talk a little bit more about how that's divided, but the short of it is the county is responsible for a quarter of that payment in the year, which would be the total of the $73,352 at the bottom here. This is treated like the other agency contracts, and the 12% reduction would see that fall from the 73,352 to the 64,500. That's a difference of $8,880. It's no coincidence that this is the exact amount of money that I am bringing to you for an over-target request to bring the level funding back up in 2021 to that which it was in 2020, which is that $293 mark. This slide breaks it down just a little bit more for you. The four major players that are in this are the county, which is responsible for the 25%, the city of Ithaca 25%, and the town of Ithaca also 25%, and that last quarter is made up for municipalities, which are listed below. The portion of that 25% that they are responsible for is calculated on a formula that addresses the, I believe, the most recent assessed property values for each municipality, and it takes into account an average of participants for the last 3 years from each of those particular municipalities, and then it is divided. Because this is a unit and a partnership, if the county would pull the 25% out, which is the 8802, that would, and all those other partners acted in the same way, that $8,000 quickly becomes about $35,000. And if you look, as I did some figuring, and if we go back to the $293,000 flat line budget, which we are hoping to get, that $35,000 is about just under 38% of their operations budget and would be really devastating to the rec partnership. And so we're asking that we go ahead and bring that back. Let's see, I think that, so that's all that I have for you guys tonight. I know the main takeaway is that is not that we're in serious peril, even though we are. But I'd like to suggest that partnerships. I started the presentation by thanking the people and the organizations that make the work that I do possible. And that's how we're going to get through this together. So I just want to say thank you, and I am able to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Kate. Really appreciate that. The numbers are a different scale than some departments, but the impact is nevertheless huge. So any questions? I see Amanda's got a hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I have two questions. One is about youth services. So if we could go back. Oh,
Do I need to?
No, I'm just trying to find it on my computer. Anyway, there's a line under your budget called Other Finance, and I was just wondering what that means.
The budget that says Other Finance.
I'm just trying to find it again, but
Youth services. Teresa, do you see that?
On page 217, or the front page, Amanda?
Yeah, it's the front page of the youth services.
That is the city sales tax.
There you go. Thank you.
Sales tax. But
yes,
but that's an expense. I don't understand that.
It's a wash. We pay it out to the city of Ithaca, but then we get the revenue. I mean, it's a wash for our department. It's just come through our department.
Okay. Okay.
Amanda, if you look below that, you got revenues. There's the same revenue, the same dollar amount under local revenue.
Oh, okay. All right. Great. That makes sense. Thank you. And then my other question is about the rec partnership, and I don't know if you can answer this, but or if anyone can answer this, but the other municipalities that are participating in this, do they have it in their budgets to continue their regular payments as well?
Actually, I anticipated that question, so I'm going to try to do my best to answer it. when we talk about the 25%, the county obviously is making a good faith effort. We've heard that the town of Ithaca is making good faith effort, and those responsible people from the smaller municipalities also have made a good faith effort. The last partner we're working with and waiting on, hopefully next week we'll know for sure, is the city of Ithaca. Liz Vance put two budget scenarios forward to the rec partnership. One of them was a -5% budget. The other one was a flat budget, not a maintenance of effort, but flat. So there's loss in both of them. The board voted to go with a flat budget. The problem with that being, if the city forces the 15% reduction, I believe, then the rec partnership board is going to have to come back together, and we will probably be looking a lot more like that -5%. So if that happens, hold on here, let's see here. So if the 5% budget goes through, the county's portion would drop to $69,685. So it's about a $3,000 difference. But there is substantial loss in programming and staff that will happen to the rec partnership if that goes through. So that's a long way of saying most yes, but we still are kind of in limbo with that.
So city residents need to petition city council to make sure that they put money into this.
Yes, that they honor the funding from at least the funding levels from last year would be great.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
I've got Dan or Mike or both.
I'll start. Just a quick comment first about Amanda's question. Having been on a town board, I can tell you that when we looked at the rec partnership funding formula, it made a big difference to us if the other municipalities, the bigger ones, were kicking in their money. So they're probably asking the same question that you just asked, in their minds at least. And if they see the county is ponying up its share, it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
They're more likely to do it. Two questions.
Sure.
Could you provide us a list of the agencies that are proposed to be cut in your budget? You know, the portion of the budget that goes to agencies?
So we spread that 12% out across all of the agencies and the 9 programs. So it's the Child Daycare Council, the Ithaca Youth Bureau, Learning Web, Office, the Open Doors, and then Cornell Cooperative Extension, right? So that was the other one. So when we looked at the third, it actually came out to be about a 9% cut in their funding. It wasn't the full 12%, but that state aid will really impact whether or not that becomes more significant in that realm for them or not.
Would you be able to send us a list that shows what 2020's funding is and 2021's would be?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. And then my other question is, I have heard a little bit, but it's about a runaway youth program that's in danger of being cut. Can you expand on that? I'm not even sure the name of the program.
Sure. So our 2 partners that we work with the RHY, the Runaway and Homeless Youth programs, are the Open Doors program, which is run by Family and Children's Services, which is the particular one that you're talking about. They have obviously really been hit by COVID-19 and have told us in the last couple of weeks that they are not going to be looking to renew their contract with the RHY programming for Open Doors come 2021. The good news is that we have begun preliminary talks with the Learning Web about the possibility of shifting that funding in that program over to them. And we're still in early conversations with them. We're actually planning it soon. We've been talking to Chris Cargane at the CFS. So we hope that we have something in place to make sure that we don't lose that, and we want to keep it local. So.
Okay, did I understand you correctly to say that Open Doors program was already not going to renew its contract before the funding cut was announced?
So they have, so RHY is required to make a 15% cut, or I'm sorry, a 15% match to the funding that we get from the county. It's the one exception. Everyone else is required to do a 50% match. And what they were finding is that they were having to use additional staff members to continue to write grants to try to offset that 15%. And it just is really, they've been running it with 3 staff. The main component for them is there's a 24-hour hotline that they have to maintain. And so there have been some financial issues with that. So initially in the 2021 budget we proposed, they were in there, but this conversation and this just came to life in the last couple of weeks. So the hope is to shift it to another partner.
Thank you.
Sure, yeah.
And Mike, did you have something? Mike?
No, I didn't have my hand up.
Okay. It shows up here as Dan and Mike. Anybody else have any questions? All right, I would agree with what Dan said about these small allotments, whether to agencies or especially the rec partnership, they really do make a difference. So thank you so much for getting so much out of your dollars. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yes,
All right,
thank you.
good to see you all. Thanks for being here.
Likewise.
Next department, the huge Department of Veteran Services. J.R. Claiborne. There you are. Hi, J.R.
Good evening. Hello, everybody.
Martha,
Yes. Yes, Leslie.
Martha, I'm just going to leave so that I don't participate in any part of this department's discussion or presentation.
Okay.
For the obvious reasons
Yes.
that there is benefit to my family from this department. And I asked Shauna to just text me when it is over so that I can return.
So you can just turn off and come back because we could switch Ken and JR.
Right, it's, go right ahead and do what you need to do, and I'll be back.
Okay. All
okay.
Right.
Bye.
It's fine with me if you want to trade. Oh, okay.
All right. We'll go ahead then. And you're on Veteran Services on page 202 in section 4. Welcome. Hello, JR.
Hello again. Good seeing everybody. All right. Now, if I can make this work, I had to practice doing the switch screen tonight. I'm hoping I get it right. There we go. Can you see?
There we go. Yep.
All right. Good news. Okay. So thank you, everybody. As you said, this is your Department of Veteran Services. And I just want to start with our mission. Just a reminder that we're existing to connect our local veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces and their families with federal, state, and local resources. We're doing that by making those connections with counseling, referral, or direct assistance with obtaining records, compensation, pension, and other eligible benefits, both through the federal government, such as primarily through the VA, but sometimes the Department of Defense, also the state through the Division of Veteran Services, as well as 3 or 4 different entities we have within our Tompkins County governance. As you see with our budget, big detailed budget there. The 2021 target is the minus 12% scenario. As you see that took a big chunk out of my budget, which I didn't think 12% would until I saw the numbers and felt it. The OTRs is to help try and restore that back with that 298 in change, or that 1/4% change is reflective in the fringe, the change in the fringe that we just learned about recently. There we go. So as you see, my budget is primarily me, your director for the Department of Veteran Services. The target does reduce that down to 3/4, but then it's recommended, thankfully, by Jason to restore that back to full time. The only way to meet that 12%, that minus 12%, was to basically zero out everything in my budget except for my salary and fringe, and that had to be reduced also to, as you see, the 3/4 time. So just to give you some of the highlights to let you know what you did get for that full-time position. I've got my big one here is obtaining dual accreditation. When I started this, and as you see at the top of your, page 202, I had 18 months to obtain accreditation with one service agency, and I was able to obtain both with the American Legion and through the New York State Division of Veteran Services. Also, I've been able to launch an online presence, which I want to say thank you to Svetlana Borovska and Roger Kotrafeld, both in ITS, because they were very instrumental. And I could not have gotten these done without being able to get the website and both the listservs launched. And also Twitter account was through cooperation with a Cornell grad student who from the Johnson School, who just approached me about wanting to do something to help. And when I mentioned Twitter, he's like, hey, I can do this. So I'm able to be reached and get information out on those different platforms. One of the things that I wanted to do in starting this department is trying to do something that was creating it beyond just a one-room office. And I don't say that to belittle anything, but I wanted to have it be something that this was a department that was Tompkins County style. It's something bigger than just what might be written on paper. So in doing that, I've been able to do some key partnerships, try and make things happen. One of which you'll see is the Veterans Coffee House. I do that with Team Red, White, and Blue Ithaca. You hear me talk about the coffee house quite often, and I'll show you something really cool about that towards the end of this. But that's something that we do every Thursday, twice a month, first and third Thursdays. We had been doing that live. Then we went to virtual with the COVID shutdown, and we've been able to still keep it going. The Warrior Writers, which is something that's actually meeting tonight. So you're very important. So I had to tell them I couldn't be there tonight because I had to be here. But the Warrior Writers is a group that I host on alternating Thursdays from the Veterans Coffee House. And we have between about a dozen veterans who attend that from pretty much all different times of conflict in the military. The Veterans Claim Days is something that I started out with in cooperation with New York State Division of Veterans Services staff member, John Canistero, who would give us time from his office visits up at Cornell, and he would come down here once a month. And that was good for helping me get going, was able to give our veterans and their families here. I scheduled times with them so that I could learn, and they would also get key service from him, which was really cool. I learned a lot from him. The Mental Health First Aid for Veterans course, we had one in August, and we have plans underway right now for hosting that in November. And that's been something that's been key for participants and families who have received the benefits of these courses. And then right now, it was supposed to go before COVID changed everybody's plans, but whenever our building reopens and the state has their folks go back to the office, we expect to have the John Canistero, as I said earlier, he'll be having his visits down here at the Human Service Annex. So that'll be really cool to be able to bring that level of service in combination with mine to our families, our veterans and their families. A key highlight from this year was, and many of you were there for that, was when Senator Schumer, our US Senator, came to town in February. And that was during his kind of barnstorming tour across the state in trying to encourage support for expanding the list of presumptions for our veterans who are dealing with the effects of Agent Orange even today. So that's something that's still working its way through the Congress and Senate, but it was special to be able to say that he was here. And yeah, it was a good thing, especially since this is a new department, just got on the map. That was really helpful. Something else along that line too is, and thank you for Kevin for reminding me of this, I helped administer the Memorial Celebrations Grant. And this was the grant that provides for the flags, for ordering the flags for the Memorial Day weekend, where our veterans organizations place flags on the graves of veterans throughout the county. This is something that I kind of got thrown into, and it was really an interesting exercise because, like everything else, we learned that COVID really shut down the supply to the flag makers. So we were able to find one, actually connected with a provider over here in Rochester, and he worked some magic, and we were able to get flags here on time and out, and everybody was happy. And then lastly, I just want to acknowledge that a lot of this has been a big, huge learning curve for me. I still tell people that this is the first job I've had like this that had such a steep learning curve. There are a lot of things that I was able to bring in here, but there were a whole lot of things that I've had to learn new. And I just want to acknowledge that there's a network of veteran service officers across the state, primarily those right here in Central New York, who have really been helpful for me in learning and being able to provide service to our veterans. And I do look to be the day where I can pay that backwards and forwards at the same time. I like to think I'm doing some of it now, but I look forward to when I have that professional level that these guys have done and be able to be as much help. All right. There we go. So with that said, as you'll see the over target request, these are the things that I showed in the earlier slide, this 13,420 by restoring that. that basically puts my office back to whole. So that populates all the numbers that had to be zeroed out and also restores the director's position back to full-time. And just in saying thank you, I said it last year, and it's been a year and 2 months since I was here in this seat, well, in the seat with you, but in this position again. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for just this opportunity to be able to serve my fellow veterans in this way. And just like shared a few pictures from the year, including the one with Senator Schumer, the VVA organizations, the red, white, and blue. Those were the things, the picture we took for commemorating the POW MIA watchfire. And the last corner, I always like catching the photographer because the photographer was never in a picture. And the guy holding the camera is Charlie Harrington from the VVA 377, and he's their photographer. And the tall guy is Commander Tommy, who was doing his walking tour across the country. And he started in California, and no, in Oregon, excuse me, and came through Ithaca on his way back to Poughkeepsie. So that was our they had a little shindig for him here. So that was kind of cool to be able to look back and share all those pictures, and it's good memories for me as well. And so I thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, JR. How almost bizarre it feels to see people next to each other without masks on, but.
Yes, I agree.
So, yeah.
I'm trying to find out how to stop sharing my picture. Here we go. There.
All right,
Okay.
fantastic. Do we have any questions or comments for JR? Mike Lane.
Hi, JR. Boy, you've been busy.
I try.
We appreciate it. I wondered, you talked about the cemetery flags. Is the cost of them in this over target that you have, or is that a different line somewhere in the budget?
Yes, that's in a different line. That's part of the celebrations. And that's not in my budget, reflected in my budget, but in another part. And I
Okay.
think Jason or Kevin, I'll have to defer to them to tell you where exactly.
All right. I knew you had been given the administration of them, but I didn't know where the funding for that was. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The unit, excuse me, the unit is Memorial Celebrations. And it's
Okay.
page 4, section 4, page 130.
Thank you, Kevin.
You bet, Mike.
That was Johnny on the spot. Thanks, Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Kevin.
Annie and then Anna.
He's been waiting to say that all night.
Thank you. I just want to say a couple things. First off, JR, thanks for helping the different agencies get the flags, including in my district. And not especially in my district, but including my district. And so also, I wanted to say publicly, I really appreciate your help with the constituent that I brought into you a couple of times, who was really struggling in a lot of different ways. And this was many, many months ago. We started with this, and I just remember you running into roadblocks going, I have to figure out how to do that, or that's not okay that I can't access that information. I have to figure out if I can get authorization to get that information. And then the next time we would see you, you were working on getting that, and now you've gotten a lot of the, workarounds or authorizations to do this and to do your job better for the people of the county. So I appreciate that. And my question is, how do you see this impacting in your daily day-to-day things that you'll be doing as far as having reduced hours?
Oh, I'm trying to say, what's a good word to say that? It would be very impactful. Just to say it, to say it succinctly, it'd be very impactful because I already have a backlog of things, of people, phone calls to catch back up with. I've got some people in waiting queues that we're just waiting on some steps coming through the VA, another process in order to move them through. So to have a reduction in my time, would really slow things down tremendously.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And McKellis.
Thank you, Martha. I'm curious, this is the first time that I've had the opportunity to see a department come into being from not having one. And there was certainly a need because we have thousands of veterans here in Tompkins County that were previously either not being served or going to other veteran affairs offices. So I'm curious what the feedback has been and whether you have seen a lot of people coming who were being served by other offices coming here, whether you've seen that shift. Whether you've seen sort of an uptick in people who are now being, because of the assistance of the office and just the presence, being able to access, more healthcare, mental health care, support services for housing. So just getting a sense of what the impact of having the office has been, just with respect to your hours and being there.
Well, yes. The short answer is yes. There's been, actually coming here, there've been a few folks that have said that since we're here in Ithaca now, they don't have to travel to Cortland or to Schuyler. And they've, because we have good working relationships, been able to just reach out and have their records sent to me. There have been people who have heard about this from other folks. Apparently there's a good network, a good grapevine network out there. So people have come to me because they've had good dealings with me from other folks. And also there are a lot of people who are just, let me say it differently. There are my counterparts in the other counties are happy to be able to say, hey, you have somebody there in Ithaca. Apparently there were a lot of folks. I talked to the former director in Cortland, and he had said at one point there, they had started keeping track of how many veterans from Tompkins were coming, because that was a good chunk of how many people they saw. So those people have been coming this way now. Can't say that all of them, because some of them are legacy, but there are quite a few of them who now come my direction and I'm able to help. I missed one part of your question.
Are we keeping any data on the number of vets that are newly getting services like DSS services, housing supports, Medicaid or medical insurance support through working through the Veterans Affairs Office here? Do we keep those numbers?
Not directly. I'm working with something to try and get it where I can port all that information into and be able to sort those numbers and present them to you. But I can tell you that even though my office has an ebb and flow, particularly because of COVID, there's never a dull moment. There's never a still moment here. I would probably just guesstimate that probably in a week's time, there are probably, I'd say maybe 3 to 5 people who are brand new, haven't had services anywhere. There might be 2 or 3 who they're looking to either renew a claim or to add on to a claim for an increase or something to that effect. And then there are the families of veterans, whether they're deceased or they're the spouses who are looking to get help for their families. And those calls I get constantly.
That's super helpful.
Yes. One of the things I think that's really cool, and it's, the richness that we have here in Tompkins, is being able to, refer people who call me for things that a lot of times, because the VA takes time to deal with, I'm able to say, well, while we're working through this process, let me tell you about what we have here locally. And whether that's referring them to COFA, someone to DSS, or even to like FoodNet or somewhere else, that's been helpful. And I like to think that they've been happy to be able to refer people back to me, because I do get referrals from other agencies around, and including the VA itself. It's always interesting to have someone tell me that they were talking to the VA in Syracuse or somewhere else, and they told them to call me. So
wonderful.
I do want to add one thing too to Ann's question about what would cutback do. A lot of the things that I showed you that I've been able to accomplish this past year for our veterans community, some of those things would not be done because there just would not be time to get that done.
All right, thank you, Jared. Deborah Dawson.
Yeah, I know it's late. I'll be brief. I think the most important part of creating this office and this job was finding a person who had the heart for the job. And JR, you clearly have the heart for the job. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And your question is, Deborah?
Isn't that right?
Right. You're supposed to say true. So, all right. Thank you very much, JR. We really, really appreciate all you're doing. It is hard to create a new department, and it sounds really terrific. And we really are grateful for what you're doing.
Yes, if I can do one more thing here with the share screen, I want to show you, this was today's excitement. If this thing will work right for me. So today our Veterans Coffee House, I mentioned that earlier. Today we went back live again. This was our first attempt. It actually went well. We probably had almost a couple of dozen people come through, a lot of them Vietnam veterans. We did this out at the Dryden Veterans Hall, and it was really very cool because so many of them came out, and part of the deal we had there was to do the video. I think hopefully if you all received my message, there was a video that was done for the POWMIA Recognition Day. That was kind of our substitute for the annual watch fire that the VVA has out in Lansing. And so part of today's coffee house was the official airing of that video to the veterans. And it was really interesting because some of the guys that were in the video were actually in the crowd. So it was good for them to be able to see themselves. So they had a good time and they made their own event. We were inside setting up, didn't realize that they were having a flag raising outside. So when Anna came from the Ithaca Voice and did all this, it was really kind of a good day for everybody all around. So I just wanted to show you this because this just got posted probably like 3 o'clock today. So in our coffee house was 11 to 2. And so she came in, did her magic, and voila. So I just wanted to show that good sense of pride. Just the labor of love that went into creating the video itself was pretty amazing just to be a part of. So, and something else that I have to say thank you for putting me in this position and just being able to be a cog in the wheel to make this happen for our veterans community has really been something special.
That's great, JR. And I can tell that 2 or 3 legislators are right now posting it on Facebook. So, all right, we'll share that around. Thanks so very much for all that you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, Shauna or somebody can text Leslin to come on back. And we have Human Rights, Ken Clark. We saved the best for last, Reverend Ken. Human Rights is on page 101 in section 4.
I'm going to see if I can successfully share my screen with you.
Everybody says that. All right.
Let's see. Hold on one second. Uh-oh.
All right, while you're doing that, I see in the chat, what's the date and time of the public forum for the budget? And I can look for that while Reverend Ken gets set up.
Ken, I think if you go to slideshow at the top.
Okay, slideshow.
Yes, keep coming to the right.
Okay.
Keep going to the right.
I got you. Okay.
All right, and I have the, I'll ask Kathy if this is right. October 7th, it's a Wednesday night for the public forum, and we have down 7:30. I'm not sure we actually picked up that as the time, but.
I don't know, Martha, that was a tentative date. That's always been handled through public information.
Okay, so that's probably why people aren't sure about it. I think it was tentative, and then we did have, since we moved everything back some from the original calendar, if folks just kind of pencil in October 7th in the evening, we'll confirm that.
Martha,
We'll confirm
that is the time that we have penciled in. This is Dominic. That is the time we had penciled in, but we can confirm that and send that up to everyone.
Yeah, one issue is that we often have, by the time we do the public forum, we've often had more presentations than we will have had this year. Although that gives us 4 out of 1, 2, 3, out of 6 of them. So, all right, we'll take a look, but pencil that in and we'll confirm. All right, Ken, you've got it. Can you make it one?
Did I get it?
Ken,
Yes.
underneath the title of your presentation,
Okay.
it says slideshow. It's at the top of your screen.
Okay. To the right, you said?
Well, it's to the left now.
To the left.
Right below your title, where it says 2021 budget presentation. It says
Okay.
help, it says help, and then view, review, and then slideshow.
2 to the left.
Go 2 to the left
Okay.
with your cursor.
Okay. I'm trying to do this. Trying not to be a Luddite.
Okay,
At least I'll feel like I'm in good company.
Go to the right, Ken.
Okay. Oh, slideshow.
and then from beginning.
There we go.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Sorry that took a little time. Okay. The recommended budget here reflects a reduction of $36,872 change from the 2020 budget. And the OTR that's included in this request then changes that reduction to $26,872. I'll talk a little bit more about the OTR on the last slide in this presentation. In order to arrive at the target goal for budget reduction, we made cuts in these areas that are listed above these line items. Education and promotion, program expenses, travel and training, and local mileage. And, as I said previously, that we will be requesting a OTR of $10,000 and particularly to focus on education and promotion. The reductions did not change our FTEs. We still have 3 FTEs within our budget. My position is director, the receptionist, and the vacant education and outreach coordinator position, which I hope we'll be able to fill in 2021 if resources permit. We currently have, as we have had since January, Lourdes Cabrera working as an information aide, and she is also helping to support public health, responding to Jason's request for staff to be released to help to provide support to that staff. And so Lourdes has begun to undergo a series of trainings and is enjoying her experience there, as well as also getting work done for us in OHR. So the over the target request, which sources will come from rollover, is for education and promotion, excuse me, funding. This will give us some additional resources to produce programming in light of our inability to organize in-person events. And as you know, education and promotion are primary means for our office to engage a broader public. And that interaction is all the more important in light of the pandemic, in which, you know, there's no determined end in sight at this juncture. So what we hope to do in 2021 with this is to address programming, which would largely kind of cover these areas, issues of racism, anti-racism, and equity related to current protest, housing in the time of a pandemic, the future of affirmatively affirming fair housing, which we would do in conjunction with CNY Fair Housing. Sally Santangelo and I are beginning to outline the contours of what we will do for this year. Our plans were scuttled in large measure for 2020 by the pandemic, though we do have a couple of events coming up in the next couple of weeks. Collaborations with other county departments, revitalizing some early initiatives that we organized in 2019, addressing issues that affect the LGBT community and so forth. And also too, a big, an important piece in all this will be in working in conjunction and in coordination with our new Chief Equity and Diversity Officer, Deanna Carruthers. We have begun to meet on a regular basis, and already Deanna's office is helping to co-sponsor with Public Health the series of programs that we're going to be doing monthly starting next Tuesday, focusing on human rights in public health. And so that's, our, perspectives going forward and our rationale for requesting the OTR. So I'm open to your questions and comments at this time.
Thank you very much, Reverend Ken. Appreciate that. Small but mighty department.
I'm successful in stopping the share.
Good job. All right. Do we have any questions? I have I have a question. Your FTEs include the third person, the Education and Outreach Coordinator. So that position is vacant.
Yeah, yes.
Have you, but it is, excuse me, it is funded in this budget.
Yes, it is. Yes.
So are you, do you have a plan, or is it, maybe this is a Jason question, is this one, can this one be filled?
It is not filled right now, but assuming the budget is adopted in November and the position is funded, then all those, those positions would keep. Let me rephrase that. Most likely, all the positions would be given the green light to go get filled, unless there's some drastic events that happen with the state that requires us to pause. But most likely, if the budget is adopted, this position would give the green light to get filled for next year.
Okay, so it's part of the hiring freeze right now.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Okay, that makes me realize that might be, if we could get a summary from your office, Jason, of what are those funded positions that are vacant right now that, if plans go ahead, would be filled in 2021. If we could put that list together.
All right. It's not easily put together, but we'll find a way to put it together. It's what you're looking for are positions that are vacant now that would be filled, that are funded in the budget.
Yes.
Okay.
And as you just said, if worse things come to pass, if we have to take another look at hiring freeze or cutting positions, those places where we don't have incumbents would be a good list to have, unfortunately.
So obviously all of the 18 positions that the current staff are being moved to are all vacant now. That would be part of them, but we can do that.
Right, but they're not all planned to be included in the budget. They're not included.
No, my point is the 18 positions that are filled now that are expected to be eliminated with the proposed budget are moving into positions that are currently vacant.
Are there any, okay, thank you for helping me figure this out. So are there any other positions beside those 18?
Oh, sure.
Okay, that would be available to hire people in?
Yes.
2021. Okay, that's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Henry.
Yes. Jason, are we pausing on the hiring freeze for 2021?
Not right now. I mean, there's still a few months left in this year, but assuming these positions are funded in the budget, there a lot of the positions that need to be filled need to be filled for mandated purposes, or there's some DSS, public health, mental health positions that are support positions that are critical for them to function. So all intents and purposes is assuming the budget is adopted, If there are vacant positions, they would be given the green light to be filled next year.
So the
Okay.
so we expect the pause to continue through 2020. Okay. Is that what you're getting at, Henry?
Yes, that's what I'm getting at. Whether the pause would be continued or whether that would be just subject, that these other positions would not be subject to the pause, but all other positions would be subject to the pause.
Right. I mean, so I think there's probably a timing discussion here. The intent is that the budget would be adopted, what positions are funded would be given the ability to fill those positions as they would in normal years. And obviously any budgeted expenditures like equipment, those types of things would continue to move forward into the new year. Now, if all of a sudden, the executive budget comes out in January that it gives us a massive redirection, then, I may have to hit the pause button again, because we need to figure out how the budget pans out. That's just something we'll know more about as time goes on.
Okay.
I mean, there's a point to where you get to where you have to, you have to function, and, if you continue to delay on filling vacancies, you're not going to be able to meet your core services anymore.
Yeah, we get that. Annie Corman.
Thanks for your presentation, Ken. And since we're asking questions of Jason, I'll put him on the spot again. So as far as this OTR being requested to use $10,000 of rollover, so in other years, in yesteryears, we would departments would have put forth resolutions, to use up their rollover money. And so this year being different, are we going to have like a different accounting system as far as at the end of the year, people, any money that's left in their departments that just goes back to contingent funds or something?
So rollover was a policy that we wanted to get to this year to update, and that got pushed off the focus area, right, just because of COVID. So several things happened with rollover this year. So right now, the rollover that's being considered in the proposals for this budget are certified 2019 rollover. So it's as of the last fiscal year that's been completed. My direction to the staff was, since we have a flexible, or I would say a flexible hiring and spending freeze, not to be requesting any use of rollover in the current year. But then there's also the requested use of rollover for the 2021 year, which is what this is. I also told them that I consider it highly unlikely that we would have rollover at the end of 2020 to be calculated into their balances, because there's going to most likely be an operating deficit. It just doesn't seem to be that's appropriate. And that's probably where we have to start to do a review and probably a refocus of the rollover policy. There's elements of the policy that are being executed now that aren't part of the policy, and they're a part of the policy that isn't being executed now. So it's a policy that needs to be reviewed and updated and tossed around a little bit, because it's not reflective of the current practice either. So in short, there is no use of rollover in the current year, which would generally around now you would see some of those requests coming forward. There is requested, and what we did is said, listen, if you have rollover, rather than do a one-time request, I wanted to see them use rollover and go through that moving forward in future years, which is why you'll see some of the rollover requests for 21. And then really, if we're going to have an operating deficit in 20, it's kind of hard to justify having rollover growth.
So if people go to page 32 in section 2, that's your page.
Yeah.
Summarizes this. And you can see there's requested for a whole column, requested for use in 2020, and those are zeros all the way down. Jason, Annie, were you finished? Okay, Jason, are you saying, so then I see remaining balance, 1.1 million.
Yep.
Are you saying you would expect to sweep those funds?
No, not at all. I don't know how we want to proceed with it. I'm saying that the policy needs to be reviewed as to how we proceed with it. There's some nuances to rollover that needs to be cleaned up as to how it's finally calculated. The policy isn't consistent with what's being done. So for example, the policy allows personnel and fringes to be calculated, which isn't the current practice. So I mean, this ultimately is just unassigned fund balance. It's just what we would call assigned unassigned fund balance. It's another term of fund balance. So I think getting into understanding the current policy and the current practice are two different things, and then reviewing that and understanding how you want to move forward, particularly in a year like this year where you're going to have an operating loss, or most likely have an operating loss.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Ken? All right. Well, thank you very much, Ken. The list of your upcoming seminars, workshops, presentations is impressive, and it's really exciting to see those. And I'm sure the community is taking advantage of them, and we really appreciate your outreach there. So thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. We're excited about the series, and we'll be looking at where we are at the end of December. Dominic, Samantha Hilson, and I, who've been planning this, and see if we want to take this further.
Terrific. Excellent. It's a great topic. Thank you so much.
Well,
all right. Well, that I think brings us to a close for the evening. And everybody, I'm sure, remembers that on the 29th, we start at 4:30, and that is Tuesday night. And I hope that everybody will be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And I also want to make a special request. I hope everybody will send all their questions by email to Jason tomorrow, because Jason has a very busy day, and I think we should just load up his inbox because it's his birthday tomorrow. So I hope that everybody will just, keep him busy. So
happy birthday, Jason.
Martha?
Sing happy birthday.
Martha, could everybody unmute for a second so we could embarrassing sing happy birthday, please?
Yeah, yes, that's a great idea.
Everybody ready?
Right.
All right, you start the tone, Annie.
Oh, no. That would be bad. Anna,
Ready?
All right, 2, 3.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jason. Happy birthday to you.
Okay.
Oh God, that was the worst happy birthday ever.
That's what makes it so great.
If there's
Go
any
right
money
ahead, load up
left,
his
we're gonna
inbox, but
get.
don't expect responses.
You'll never forget that.
We're going to have singing lessons put into the legislature's training budget for next year.
And he can play that over and over again.
Good night, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Good
night,
night, Jason. Enjoy the time. Good
Thanks,
night,
Martha.
everybody. Bye-bye.